Good morning. The time is 10 o'clock. Today is Friday, November the 16th, 2018. We will call the meeting of the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board to order. First order of business for us will be the pledges of allegiance, but I'd like to start by saying on the heels of Veterans Day, we've got some members of our board and senior leadership that have served, and I would like to take a second to say thank you for that service. We appreciate your continued service here on our board, and I wanted to recognize both our board member Jeffries and Bolton for your previous service and ask Mr. Jim Jeffries to lead the pledges.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Our next order of business is roll call. Present.
Present.
Present. Present. Present.
Present.
Present.
Present.
Present.
All right, how exciting, 100% attendance. Thank you all for being here today.
There we go. Got it.
Our next item is the opportunity for public comment. If there's anyone in the audience that would like to address the board on any issue not currently on our agenda for action today, we would welcome your input or comments. Seeing none, we will move to the consent agenda. Consent agenda includes items 4 and 5. Number 4 is the ratification of our official record from our August the 17th meeting and the approval of agreed final orders and surrenders in the matters of complaints number 18044, 18199, 18004, 19026, 19027, 18185, and 18227. Are there any items that the board would like to be removed from the consent agenda for separate consideration?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Jeffries?
Yes, I would like to have additional comment on number 5A, if I might.
We will pull agreed final orders for 5A. I have a general comment on 5B, so we will remove both 5A and B. Are there any other requests for movement off of the consent agenda? Hearing none, then I'll entertain a motion for items 4, 5, C, and D.
Madam Chair, I move that we accept and approve all of the items with the exception of 5A and B.
Madam Chair, a second.
So motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented with the exceptions. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Those items are approved. We will open up agenda item number 5A. Mr. Jeffries?
Morning, Troy.
Good morning, sir. Troy Bollier, Director of Standards and Enforcement Services.
When I went through, read through 5A, I got over to the USPAP ethics rule that's on page 27, and it talks about the respondent developing and transmitting 2 appraisal reports on the subject property within a 2-day time period, which were developed in a grossly negligent manner. I didn't get anywhere through my reading of the finding of facts where he had done 2 appraisals on the same property. And I know that there's 2 properties identified in the complaint, but they're certainly not the same property. So I would like for you, if you could kind of clarify that.
Yeah, I believe, and Mark, please correct me if I'm wrong here, that this was a situation where the report had bounced back and forth through quality control with, I believe, the appraisal management company. So the report for the same assignment, if you will, was submitted, has significant issues, comes back, is asked to fix it, changes are made, it goes back again. So the language there was trying to capture that back and forth.
So that was a review, somewhat of a review process on that one single report.
Correct, quality control.
Thank you.
Mr. Boyer,
Yes, sir.
if I might ask a question. So are you saying that this was under review by the AMC, whatever oversight or quality control they may have? I mean, was somebody doing an appraisal review on this? And I guess that leads to my second question. If somebody was doing that, were they not recognizing the negligence in the appraisal report?
When you say they, you're talking about the appraisal?
Well, you seem to indicate it was going back and forth between quality control at the AMC, is that correct?
Right.
Okay, so if this report was done in a grossly negligent manner, both times, did that reviewer fail to recognize that?
I don't think so, because ultimately we did get a complaint. It's not uncommon during the quality control process for the work product to go back and forth. Sometimes that's nothing worthy of a complaint. It could simply be minor things. But sometimes, and we often find once we get into a complaint, that process has gone back and forth, and the reviewer or the quality control people are in fact identifying significant issues and saying, hey, fix this. And sometimes the complaint is filed as a result of that back and forth not working out satisfactory to the complainant, in this case the AMC.
Is that what happened here?
I believe so, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you have other questions?
I have no more.
Okay. I think we can probably take up the resolution of 5A and 5B together, because my 5B question is just general in nature. Trying to understand, Troy, this appears to be an agreed final order with a revocation.
Yes, ma'am.
And near the bottom of the agreed final order is a requirement for delivery of documents and payments for compliance. And it may very well be just general language, but I'm curious, if we revoke, do they have to send something back to us? Are they required to send their certification or something? Or is this just language that's always in agreed final order?
It's standard template language, yes, ma'am.
Okay. That was my only question. Is there any other question of 5B? It just seems confusing to me. I'm not sure in a revocation we need that paragraph. But I'll leave that to the minds that are much better at that than I. So we have agenda items 5A and B. Are all the questions the board has answered with regard to those 2 items? Seeing none raised, 5A and B are up for consideration.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Jeffries?
I move that the board ratify and approve item 5A and 5B on the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. I'm not sure where that came from. Thank you, Tony. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Shout out to the guy who's running sound. Somebody's obviously improved the microphones, and so it's a good job today. Agenda item number 6 is executive session. I do believe that we have one item that I would like to ask legal counsel about, and so we will consider ourselves headed towards executive session. The time is now 10 minutes after 10 o'clock. We will go into executive session to obtain advice of legal counsel or discuss pending or contemplated litigation, including settlement offers and enforcement actions pursuant to Texas Government Code 551-071. I anticipate my question taking 15 or 20 minutes, but of course, we will need to convene in our fourth floor conference room, and so we need a little travel time. I anticipate us returning in about 35 or 40 minutes, and we will consider ourselves adjourned to executive session. It's about 2 minutes after 11 o'clock, and we are reassembled from our executive session. There is no action to be taken from executive session. Upon return to the dais, I did receive a request for public meeting comment, and so even though we've passed that agenda item, I am going to go ahead and allow that public comment. And so, Ms. Sylvia Busk from the Champion School of Real Estate, if you'd like to comment to the board.
Sylvia Bask with Champion School of
I'm
Real
sorry?
Estate.
Oh, I apologize. I've misinterpreted what I received, and it is an agenda item number 12. We will address you on agenda item number 12. Thank you for the correction. So I am going to make one other agenda adjustment. I'll see if I can do that without without fumbling. We do have an audit report. I believe it's agenda item number 20, and rather than hold that individual over, we'll go ahead and allow that presentation of agenda item number 20 now. So item 20 is the report of fiscal year 2018 internal audit activities.
Morning, Commissioners, Executive Director. My name is Jose Reyes. I'm with McCall & Jones, and I'm here to present the fiscal year 2018 Annual Internal Audit Report. Now, this document is a statutory requirement with the SAO providing the content configuration. And basically what it is, it's a summary of the fiscal year 2018 internal audit activities that were performed. And it also contains the documentation of the 2019 internal audit activities that we will perform and that were approved in the last Commissioners meeting. Any questions?
Are there any questions regarding the internal audit? Hearing none, thank you for the report.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, Board, we will move back to the committee and working group reports. We will start with agenda item number 7, the report by the Budget Committee. Our Budget Committee is chaired by Mr. Black.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All right, so the Budget Committee met via teleconference 2 weeks ago today on Friday, November 2nd. Those in attendance were myself, Clayton Black, Alex Sostre, and Tony Pena. There were numerous other members of staff present as well, including but not limited to Douglas Oldmixon, Kristen Warman, Tony Slagle. This was via teleconference, so I wasn't able to see everyone there, but so, okay, so the primary focus, what we looked at was, the primary focus on the agenda was to address recommendations that were made by the Sunset Commission as it pertains to the TALCB budget. And there were 2 specific areas that we focused on, and these 2 areas were, first of all, the TALCB budget development policy, and then the second one was the TALCB reserve funds investment policy. You are going to have those on agenda items 18 and 19. We can dig into them specifically, but we did a lot of heavy lifting. After several hours, we made numerous changes to both policies, which are submitted for you today on, once again, agenda items 18 and 19. For clarification, I hope y'all have been able to look over it, but the changes that we made are in red. And there were areas that were deleted, other areas where we added, et cetera, and so forth. But the red, what you'll see in red, are the changes that we made. So both policies with their edits were independently voted on by all 3 committee members and passed unanimously. Let's see here. I already mentioned these are going to come up on 18 and 19 specifically, but to kind of wrap it up here, I want to thank the other 2 board members, Mr. Pena and Mr. Sostre, for your input and due diligence, and specifically staff as well. A lot of great heavy lifting, and a lot of great things came out of it, and we worked together, all of us as a group, coming up with this. So having said that, ultimately the board is responsible to approve this. So it did pass through committee. We think we're off to a good start, but I not only welcome, but I encourage all of my fellow board members to engage in this process as it comes up in agenda items 18 and 19, and we can make whatever changes we need to. We can start over, or we can pass it as is, or we don't have to take any action. But I want to make it very clear that ultimately it came through our committee, and now it's going to be up for the board. So I look forward to that discussion. And that's really the gist of my report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Black, and your committee for their work. Next report is from the Education Committee, chaired by Mr. Jeffries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Education Committee meeting was held on October 25th of this year via teleconference, and the members in attendance were myself as the chair, and Alex Sostra was also in attendance. There was no other board members in attendance. We had a full staff in attendance, including Kristen Warman, the General Counsel, Tony Slagle, Government Affairs, Troy Ballou, Director, SES, Gwen Jackson, Director, ELS, Jennifer Wheeler, Education Manager, and Dion Frederick, the Recording Secretary. Also in attendance were Joe Waller with FACT, Sylvia Busk with Champion School of Real Estate, and Glenn Garone. The committee considered comments received on the proposed amendments to 22 TAC 153.5, and 153.18, Appraiser Continuing Education, and new rules 22 TAC 153.40, approval of continuing education providers and courses, and received the commenters and 153.41 ACE providers, compliance and enforcement. We did receive one comment about the question of charging $25 for approval of a one-time ACE course offering, Appraiser Continuing Education offering, and that comment suggested that we should that $25 should be up to 4 hours in length rather than just the 2 hours. And after due consideration, the committee found that the ACE course approval process requires additional time and work for staff review as the course length increases, and recommended adoption of the $25 fee only for approval of 2-hour one-time course offerings as proposed. And would remind ourselves that the 2 hours is the minimum length of time required for an ACE course, Appraiser Continuing Education course, under the Appraisal Qualifications Board and federal law. For these reasons, the committee recommends the board adopt the amendments and new rules as published. Might also point out that the committee also asked staff to bring information on the following topics to a future meeting for consideration. We wanted to look at the current process and requirements for approving continuing education courses. We wanted to look at some alternative processes to that might be considered. And we wanted to ask for information on what would be needed to accept credit cards for approval of continuing education courses. The committee did not schedule a future meeting date, and that's my report, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffries, and to your committee for the hard work they are doing. Our next report will be by the Enforcement Committee, which is chaired by Chance Bolton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Enforcement Committee met on October 10th and also October 12th as we ran over our allotted time on the 10th. We had lots of things to talk about. Committee members in attendance were myself, Chance Bolton, Buster Renfro, and Tony Pena. We were also joined by Madam Chair, Jamie Wycliffe. Staff in attendance included General Counsel Kristen Warman, Deputy Commissioner Tony Slagle, Director of Standards and Enforcement Troy Bollier, Staff Attorney Mark Lee, and Appraiser Investigator Jim Mitchell. Members of the public in attendance included delegation from FACT, including Victor Probant, Paul Hornsby, Joe Waller, Greg Stevens, Walt Sanderson, as well as others, including Glenn Garoon, Dolores Kraft Longoria, Scott DiBiasio, excuse me, with the Appraisal Institute, and Alan Gardner, Mark Loftus, and attorney Don Walden. The committee considered several issues, including mentor conflict of interest and related amendments to the mentor agreement, comments and further action regarding the proposal to allow appraisers to perform evaluations in draft TALCB Rule 155, TAC 3, amendments to TALCB Rule 157, TAC 4 regarding computation of time, and proposed revisions to the appraisal experience audit. The committee also heard a presentation from FACT about the experience audit process and considered experience audit workload, statistics, processing times, and possible improvements provided by staff. The committee found that it has a conflict of interest for a TALCB mentor to serve as an advocate or otherwise represent a respondent against TALCB in any enforcement proceeding, and recommends the board adopt amendments to the mentor agreement consistent with this finding. The committee also recommends the board adopt additional amendments to the mentor agreement requiring TALCB mentors to sign a confidentiality agreement to receive confidential information as defined in Texas Occupation Code 1103 TAC 460 during the term of the approved mentor, and clarifying that the board may revoke a mentor appointment at any time if the approved mentor violates the guidelines for mentorship or no longer meets the qualifications for mentors established by the board. The committee directed staff to gather information regarding appraiser performance of evaluations in other states, including Georgia, Tennessee, and Florida, for a presentation at a future committee meeting. The committee also listened to concerns from stakeholders and reviewed workload statistics from staff about the experience audit process and suggested changes to the experience audit. The committee directed staff to prepare an amendment to the TALCB Rule 153 TAC 15 to shorten the response time from 60 days to 20 days for responding to TALCB requests for information. The committee recommends the board publish this proposed amendment for public comment and present the changes to the experience affidavit to the board for approval. The committee considered proposing amendments to TALCB Rule 157 TAC 4 to clarify and further explain how to compute time under the TALCB rules, and the committee recommends the board publish proposed amendments to the TALCB Rule 157 TAC 4 for public comment. We did not set a future meeting date. I would like to also comment and commend the enforcement staff for working to, particularly Director Bollier, on their openness to exploring ways to continue to ensure transparency and equality and fairness in the enforcement process. A couple of the initiatives that have been brought forth is a call monitoring initiative, as well as plans for a mentor roundtable with investigators, and an additionally experience audit process education for the public. And that concludes our report.
Thank you. Sounds like lots of hard work. I was present for part of that, but I did not come to the continuation of your meeting, so you were very efficient in
You
the...
were greatly missed, Ms. Chairman.
I'm certain that's true. Next agenda item is agenda item number 10, report by the Executive Committee. I will provide that report. As I lead into the report, I want to give you a reminder that we're approaching a 2-year period of time where we've been operating at a disadvantage as it relates to our AMC committee. And happy to remind you that we did receive an AMC appointment at our last board meeting, and we will look at continuing to try and improve that opportunity. I believe your agenda item number 13 will allow us to reassemble that committee with 3 people as a quorum, so that we can get to work with that in a more efficient method. So we look forward to that opportunity in the absence of that AMC assembled committee. Your executive committee took up some things that were necessary to continue to operate in an efficient method as it relates to AMCs. We quickly identified that we were ill-equipped to manage as effectively as our AMC committee would be. But I was joined at the meeting by Vice Chair Martha Gale Reed Lynch and by Executive Committee Member Buster Renfro. There were no other board members in attendance. We did have AMC committee members in attendance, including Sarah Oates, who is a longstanding helpful resource and committee member, and our new committee member that we welcomed, Mr. David Mintasana. And additionally, staff in attendance was Commissioner Oldmixon and Kristen Warman, our general counsel. There were no members of the public in attendance. The committee considered several issues, including comments received on proposed amendments to Chapter 159 of the TALCB rules relating to the appraisal management companies, proposals of amendments to the TALCB Rule 159.104, the agency's response to the Sunset Commission staff report, and scheduling a workshop for board member training on November the 15th, 2018. After due consideration of comments received on proposed amendments to Chapter 159 of the TALCB rules, the committee recommends the board adopt the proposed amendments to the changes as discussed. The committee also recommends the board publish proposed amendments to TALCB Rule 159.104 for public comment. The committee asked staff to present changes to TALCB budget development and reserve fund investment policies to the Budget Committee for consideration and recommendation before the November board meeting. Good work, Budget Committee, for responding so quickly, as discussed in the agency's response in the Sunset Commission. Finally, the committee recommended the board hold a half-day training workshop on the afternoon of November the 15th, 2018. That did happen. It required each of you to commit even more time and come in early yesterday, and you worked into the evening last night. I appreciate your commitment to the additional training that happened at the workshop, and appreciate the positive comments and recommendations that came from that. I think that we are always striving to improve, and I think that is evident in your commitment to your position. I'd like to add a brief comment as it relates to a report from your Sunset Commission. I'm sure you'll get some of that from your staff. As your chair, I wanted to let you know that I did attend the hearing, and it was not the most pleasant day I've ever spent, but I think that we made some positive progress, or at least I tried to be your voice as well as mine from the positions that we serve. To our staff, who has been responsible for assembling a great deal of information and done a lot of heavy lifting as it related to both preparing for Sunset, for reviewing and responding to the Sunset Report, in addition to running the day-to-day operation in this organization and preparing for our year end and our fiscal year 2019. In addition to implementing the changes that we have been pushing for to improve our customer service, it seems like the stacking just never ends. So I want you to know that the board recognizes that you've been carrying an unusually heavy load, and we recognize that we have been It's been necessary for us to be, although we hope polite, a bit more demanding of you in terms of turn times and information that we've needed. We've been a bit less able to be patient for some of what we've needed, and we recognize your professionalism. We recognize your extra hours. I know many of you have been here in this building, and the very short time I've spent with you this week, way past a time that normal people would go home, and here way earlier than normal people would arrive at their jobs. And so we thank you for that. We, as I stated in our sunset report and from the board's position, there were some things that we don't think accurately reflected the kinds of effort that you make on a day-to-day basis, and I certainly don't think that a hard look that we got accurately reflects the professionalism inside this organization, and we want you to know we appreciate you, and we don't take those words that were given to us as recommendations for improvement as complete and whole representations of this organization. So thank you for the work that you've done, and thank you for continuing to work. And I am sorry to just give you the foreboding that when we get to the future agenda items, I'm going to ask for a little more work, because I think that at the end it will make us better. So with that being said, committee reports have been completed. Are there any comments the board would like to make before we move to staff reports? Hearing none, we will hear staff reports.
Good morning, Madam Chair and board members. Welcome to your regular November meeting. Except, of course, this is not an ordinary November, because this year our agency is in the midst of the sunset review process. I thank the chair for the very kind words. The staff has been working extraordinary hours and with exceptional effort to make sure that all of the needs of the board and the commission are met as we undergo this process. So on Wednesday, so thank you for those very kind words. Yes, on behalf of the staff, we're grateful to have the volunteer leadership of the board members and the commissioners, and we commit to continue to provide the level of professionalism and performance that you expect of us, and you rightfully expect of us. This Wednesday, your chairs, both the chairs of the commission and the board, along with 6 additional commissioners and other key members of the agency staff team present, the 2 chairs and I testified before the Sunset Advisory Commission and answered their questions about recommendations raised in their staff report and in our agency response. We were queried on the causes of our customer service challenges, and we had the opportunity to lay out the steps that we had taken in the past, that we are currently undergoing, and what steps lie ahead. At the commission meeting yesterday, the commissioners asked that the staff prepare for review by their executive committee, and I would offer the same opportunity to the executive committee here, a very brief recap of the recommendations that this agency is making in a format that follows the action items that the commissioners on the Sunset Commission are accustomed to seeing. So in the modification format. So putting the recommendations of this agency into the modification format. And so we committed to do that. That is due by Monday at 5 p.m. And so we'll work on that today and over the weekend and get it to the executive committee members for review and final approval in time to get it filed. Okay. So between now and December the 12th, there is a December 3rd deadline for modifications, and so that was one of the things that brought up about that recommendation to help support the commissioners who might be willing to, or wanting to offer modifications, to give them suggested language. That is due December the 3rd, and then on December the 12th, the Sunset Commissioners, between now and December 12th, they'll work on any adjustments to the recommendations with a decision date planned for December the 12th. And so we'll be first on the agenda for that, on the hearing on that date, the schedule for that date. We anticipate will be first on the agenda. Your staff commits to continue to make progress on all of the issues that we've identified, and also to remain a ready resource for the Sunset team as needed to ensure that the members are fully informed when it comes time to vote on the 12th. So that's covering the Sunset related items, and I'll be happy to answer, as soon as I finish, answer any other questions that you have about that. So moving on to other report items, after more than 30 years of service to this agency, our Reception and Communication Services Director, Lori Deanda, retired earlier this month. Her steadfast commitment and good humor will be missed. But we also know that she will be enjoying time with her family and cheering on our efforts to constantly improve the operations of our contact center. We have received applications for the position, which has been posted, and we will soon be interviewing qualified candidates to fill that spot. In October, the State Employee Charitable Campaign is conducted, and our agency is always an active and a very active participant in the State Employee Charitable Campaign, and this year was no exception. We had a 92% participation among the staff, and we raised over $23,000 for charity. And that's so that is 9 years running now that we have set significant records in both participation and overall dollars. And so I always want to praise the staff to the policymakers to let you know about their very generous hearts. In October also, we attended the ARO conference, the Association of Appraiser Regulatory Officials, of which both your general counsel and myself are privileged to sit on the board of directors for. The meeting was attended by our vice chair, Martha Gale Reed Lynch, our general counsel, Troy Bullier, the Standards Enforcement Services Director, and myself. And as always, it is, and this year particularly, there was actually advances made on very important issues. So the discussion of issues that require coordination between the states and the federal government, and ARO is the nexus where those conversations happen. And we actually advanced several important agenda topics. And so that was well worth our time, and I want to thank the vice chair for attending, as our chair was not able to. Of course, on October the 12th, we had our unprecedented agency joint session between the board and the commission to work on the agency response, and the results of that have been very positive. On October the 17th, Three of us attended a legislative conference that happens once every 2 years in preparation for the legislature, where we hear from key members of leadership. And so that was a day well worth the time that we devoted to it. On November the 5th, your General Counsel, Christian Warman, represented us and Arrow specifically at the Appraisal Subcommittee roundtable. So that's the second opportunity that she has had to do that. And I know all of the members of Arrow really appreciate the diligence with which she approaches that task and the insight that she brings back from it. So that's, I believe that ASC will continue to provide those roundtables, and we look forward to her continued participation in that. It's a new forum that ASC has put together to deal with issues. They're trying to listen to their constituency just like we do. Just so happens we're their constituency. So, yesterday I sent you an email with notice of and a link to the annual reports, many of which we are required to file with leadership. And so the recent ones that were highlighted in that email were the annual financial report due in beginning of late September, early October, the SDSI report due the beginning of November, the audit plan that you, both the report from this past year and the plan going forward, which you have in your materials today, as well as the contracts awarded. So that's the commitment, or the reason that I do that, is a commitment to making sure that while we put reports on our website every month, we have the normal monthly reports that you see at these meetings, and this year, or this meeting every year, you also get a year-over-year comparison. But we do those normal performance reports every single month, and we put them on our website. But we don't tell you that we just did that, okay? And so every month now, any reports that we send to leadership, and after we have posted our monthly performance reports, I will send you a link to that, so that you can, if there's any particular thing that you are interested in tracking, or that you want to ask questions about, you don't have to wait till this meeting, okay? That's part of our commitment to keep you more informed on the day-to-day operations that we conduct on your behalf. Coming up, there will be a biennial SDSI report. So there's the annual one we just filed. There is one that is due every 2 years, right before the session starts. So we'll file that before the session starts, and hopefully by the end of the year. And it includes a recap of all of our financial information, so the AFRs, all of the audits that have happened in the last 2 years, as well as descriptions of any fee changes, changes in jurisdiction, and summaries of rule updates. Now, of course, this year we've been through the quadrennial rule review. That's not the kind of stuff they're looking for. We'll report that we did that, but that kind of cleanup is not what they're looking for. Looking for substantive description of substantive rule changes. And of course, we will copy you on that as well before it is filed. Also looking forward, December the 18th, many of you or who are appointees of Governor Abbott will get another day of training here in Austin, or actually over at the Capitol. And so if you've received an email invitation to register, know that please do register individually using that link, but you don't have to pay anything. The agency, we have asked the governor's office to invoice us after the registration closes, and then we'll pay all at one time. And then, of course, you're entitled to your travel expenses to come in for that day, plus a day of per diem, because it's an official requirement or an opportunity. It's an official act, receiving that training.
Okay, and then one of the other monthly reports that you get, of course, I send along my summary of activities that have happened in the past month and kind of looking ahead, things that are coming. Tony Slagle, as the Deputy Commissioner and head of our kind of two frontline divisions, both RCS and ELS, sends you a customer service report every month, and he'll continue to do that. And then he'll also follow me in giving a customer service recap and the opportunity to answer any questions that you have about that. So, before I turn the podium over to him, are there any questions of me? Yes.
Yeah, I've got a question about the new position that's come available and as to whether or not the board, or at least someone from the executive committee, will have any kind of participation in that search process and the vetting of the candidate, just to have some assurance that maybe, we can all get together and make sure it's the right person for the task at hand.
That's a very interesting
Well, it's a personnel deal.
proposition. There's no
at this point, with all that's arisen.
It's a major. It's a major.
Let's make it an opportunity as opposed to. We respect and we're thankful for the work that's been done in the past, but at this point, I think it's very much an opportunity, and it always is within my organization, to get better in these situations.
So thank you for that recommendation. And that request. I will certainly take it up. I do want to make sure, and I will say that when this board hired general counsel, we asked the chair of the board to sit in on those interviews, and that was a very positive influence on that process. And so I think this is probably appropriate as well.
Okay.
Any other questions for me?
Commissioner?
Yes, sir.
You had mentioned that you would be completing the recommendations in the modification format. Can you send that to the board when that's complete?
Yes, and I apologize for not saying that. We'll send it for review and approval to the executive committee members, and then once it's all approved, we'll send to everyone.
Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah. Sorry, and that is and thank you for the reminder, because there's a commitment all through this process, because I think it's something that came out of certainly the tone of the Sunset Commission report was that there was a distance that needs to be closed on the communication gap, and so our commitment is to over communicate with you everything that's going on, so that you have the opportunity to weigh in if you wish. Okay.
Thank you. We appreciate that recognition, and thank you to the board members that are asking for those opportunities. I do think that it's important that we continue to step up, if you will. Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, let me turn it over to the Deputy Commissioner, Tony.
Good morning, Madam Chair, board members. Tony Slagle, Deputy Commissioner. I just wanted to, I've been sending all of you a monthly report with an update on the customer service phone call center issues, as well as some of the other issues. Just want to take this opportunity to, for the record, reiterate what's going on there, as well as give you an update on a few things. So as the Commissioner mentioned, Lori Dienda, who was a longtime RCS director, did retire, and we have received some applications. Are in the process of reviewing those. In the meantime, Amy Jasper, who was the call center manager for that division, is acting as director until that position is filled, and she will be presenting the RCS reports later after I'm done. Let's see here. So as I mentioned in my last report, an email report to all of you, the the numbers have maintained relatively steady in terms of the percentages over the last several months with the numbers of calls we've been able to answer as well as the abandonment rate. However, the difference between October and September in actual calls was an increase of about 15% more calls handled to the call center in October than in September. So the percentages have remained around 16% abandonment rate with an 84% or so engagement rate where either we are able to help someone on the first time they call or when they through the callback system. I did hot off the press run the numbers for this month, even though it's not a complete month, because I thought it might be interested to see if we're continuing to make progress. And so the calls have been there have been less calls this month. I don't know if that's a seasonal thing or maybe we're resolving some issues so people don't have to call. I'm not going to make any assumptions about that, but we've been averaging about 803 calls a day, which is slightly less than what we normally do. But it's interesting that for the month of November, we have been able to handle almost 70% of the calls coming into the agency on the first go-around without even having to engage the callback system. And we've been able to deal with 19% through the callback system, which is roughly 10 to 11% less than what we've been doing in other months, with an abandonment rate of 11%. So we are trending in the right direction in both things. We have received applications for the 4 staff positions we'd like to hire for the RCS call center, and we're in the process of reviewing those, and hopefully by December we'll have 4 additional people actually staffing the phones. And we are doing the same thing for the licensing division. I do want to stress that this isn't just a call center issue. It's a holistic approach in dealing with trying to make sure we have the capacity to answer the calls that come in, but also making sure that we're addressing why people are calling. So on the licensing side, we're looking at hiring 2 more people to help with that process as well as looking to automate some of the things. So on that note, I want to take a pause if anyone has any questions about the call center before I go into some of the updates on the application processing.
Yeah, Tony, what? Okay, I may have missed this, but what's the hold time? I mean, if you've got the latest and greatest on that.
I don't. I did run the numbers the other day just to see because the calls have been less than we've normally had, and as has been stated before, and we're looking on how to get this so we have apples to apples. But right now, the system calculates what's called the wait time. So that includes those people who've engaged the callback system and are waiting for a call back from us.
Sure.
So there are people who just wait on the phone for their turn, but there are people who say, oh, no, I'd like you to call me back. They leave a number and we call back. So that the wait time calculates both of those. And I want to say it was just under, it was between 8 and 10% for the month of November. And I can get that number for you before the end of the meeting and give it to you. It's a very simple report.
I was more interested in how long specifically. If they are on hold, are they holding for 20 minutes or 8 minutes?
That's what it's on average. It's between 8 to 10 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
He meant to say, he said percent, but he meant to say minutes.
I apologize.
Okay.
I'm thinking in percentages all the time. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's 8 to 10 minutes, and I'm happy to get you that exact number. I can do that. It's easy. It's easy to do.
And we tracked it last week, just to add. So we track it every week as well. It's a daily thing, but it's actually we put a report out every week, and last week it was under 6 minutes.
Right. So again, we're receiving fewer calls, which is, I'm not sure why that is. It may be that we're handling things and people are not, but it may be seasonal. So we want to make sure we're looking at that as well. But the numbers, regardless of that, the numbers are trending in the right direction.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tony.
Oh,
go ahead. Go ahead. I just had a quick question.
Yes, sir.
So you mentioned that you were looking to hire 4 new employees for the call center.
Yes, sir.
What would that bring the total to?
Well, we have actually, I know there's a couple of people considering also they're eligible for retirement. So if they don't do that, if they weren't to do that, I think it would bring the number up to 19 with the retirement of the director. And once that position, the total number we're trying to fill right now is 20 to see how that works. We had 20 in June, and the numbers were pretty good at the end of June. But then people have left. And
well, the reason I ask is, you talk about 4 new people, but that's really hard to quantify if we don't know what that increase is. I mean, 4 out of, if we had 50 and we're only adding 4. So trying to measure how we're progressing.
Yes, sir.
And what that's going to do for us is what I'm trying to quantify.
So we have 16 people right now in the division. This would, or I guess 15. 15. That would bring it up to 19. And then once the director's replaced, that would be 20.
Okay.
20 authorized positions.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Tony, this question came up yesterday at the board's workshop, but would you explain to the board that for purposes of the call center versus application and renewals, appraisers, they get put into the same call queue for all of our license holders, both for TALCB and TREC, but in ELS, for the application and renewal processes, we actually have employees that are TALCB employees that directly handle TALCB applications and renewals.
That is correct. But I would like to, thank you for bringing that up, Kristen. I would like to bring up that I have had some conversations with the commissioner over the last couple of days about possibly looking at ways to have someone dedicated to the calls for the board as well. There are some budgetary and some IT issues with that. Currently, the way the phone system is set up, unfortunately, is when someone engages the call tree, they just get dumped into line. So we need to figure out if there's a way to delineate and pull those calls out, and also, what the budgetary ramifications would be if we were to pull someone out and have them on the phones. But we are looking at all that to make a possible recommendation to the board in terms of having someone able to be directly responsible for answering board calls as they come in. So,
thank you.
Tony?
Yes, sir.
Going back to hold time, so
yes, sir.
We're at 8 to 10 minutes on average.
Yes, sir.
Even maybe up to 6 minutes. But what's the goal? Where is that, or where are we in terms of getting to as close to perfect as
well? I will speak to the fact in the past it was 10, which is I don't think anyone thinks is acceptable. So we're trying to get. It would be great to be under 5 or even less than that. So that's what I'm aiming for if we can get to that point. Right now it's this is not an excuse, but this where we were several months ago didn't happen overnight. So we're trying to fix things, and hopefully we can get these as we're making these improvements and trending in the right direction. We can get to the point where we are maintaining a 5-minute or less hold time on a regular basis.
Okay, thanks.
Excuse me. So, Tony, on the C3 report, if it shows us June through August, the average hold time was 12.05 minutes. So now it's 6 minutes. It's gone from August to now November. 12 to 6?
The 6 minutes is from last week, so that's a snapshot in time of last week.
Okay, so from 12 to 6 last week.
Yeah, I don't know what the average has been, and I can get that information for you as well for the months past the reporting in the C3 or whichever report that was. But we have been trending downward. But yeah, we looked at the numbers last week because the call volume was down, and we wanted to see what impact that had. We were also down some staff members too, so we just wanted to see what impact that had, and it was averaging around 6 minutes.
Okay, so we're still on the downward slide.
Yes, and again,
I think that anything more than 3 minutes is unacceptable.
No, and
if I have to wait
that.
on the phone 3 minutes,
I understand
not easy to live with.
I mean, the goal is not only to get the hold times down, but to increase the number of calls we're handling at the first time rate, so people don't have to engage the callback system. You want that number to be as small as possible as well.
Right.
But since implementing that, it is the callbacks and the call tree, the call center, as it's currently staffed, has been able to handle significantly more calls. That provides some bandwidth there for them to be able to do that,
Okay.
and people get the answers they need. It may not be as quick, and we're working on those numbers as well, but they are able to be answered.
Pardon me. I'd actually kind of like to jump in here, thank you, and maybe just throw this out there, because I know the expectation has been placed on this board that we get that down. So since we're here talking about it, I agree with Ms. Lynch. 3 minutes seems like an accurate number to me. Could we set that as the expectation moving forward?
So let's talk about that, because I just happen to be sitting in our lobby, okay? I want to be reasonable about what an expectation is, okay? And I want to be responsive as well. I agree with you, and if you heard my testimony, if somebody had to wait 10 minutes at my business, that's one thing. But be careful that we make the expectations so tight, Board Member Black, that we don't take care of the person on the phone. And so the comment that I would make is I actually observed, it was a walk-in situation, but I'm sure similar things happen on the phone. The stakeholder, the licensee, was standing there, and apparently there had been an expectation that they had used their credit card and paid their renewal. And instead, for whatever reason, that didn't process. And the employee could have simply said, I'm sorry, if our goal is only to shorten a time frame, then it would have been easy and efficient and effective for the employee to say, sorry, it's not here, that's not right, when you get it right, let me know. Instead, we did a fabulous job, I thought, of calming someone who was upset, because remember, the call-ins are about people's livelihood. It's not somebody calling in to say, can you please give me your address? It's somebody calling in to say, I either have a concern, a complaint, I want to get my license, or in a lot of cases, my license is up for renewal, and they don't do it but every 2 years, and I laughed and said, my renewal got sent in with mistakes. It must be the grace of God trying to remind me that it's not always as smooth as we would expect. And so be careful that we direct our staff to do something that they can achieve, but ultimately is not our goal. And so with that being said, Tony, you're welcome to answer the question. If you can make 3 minutes happen and take care of the customer, and consider the atmosphere with which we're receiving calls and the technical expertise that's needed to answer the question, I'm super fine with you making that commitment and will be thrilled. But I do not want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't want to get a call or a hold time down and do a terrible job of recognizing what we're really trying to take care of.
Well, and I'm just trying to kind of get the ball rolling, get the conversation started. So I certainly agree with what you have said, Jamie. So that may be an incorrect way to do it. I'm just kind of trying to start the process.
I'm happy to commit to getting it down as low as we possibly can without sacrificing the service we need to provide to the people calling.
And I think one of the things that we need to do as a board is, again, understand that matrix, right? And so there has been a question and a comment, and I think fairly so. As I understand it, I guess I am the longest tenured member here, we've always tried to maintain no more than 10 minutes. And is that acceptable? No. When we've always said that's not acceptable, but until you can achieve that with consistency, keeping in mind that it's an up and down matrix. The vast majority of the time, we had been able to meet those until we had unprecedented growth on one side of the industry for certain. We don't see that on the appraisal side, and we have asked, and previous boards have asked, can you separate my customer from the other folks, because it's such a much smaller pool that we probably could get our numbers down, but the effective position we're in is that we are in a much bigger pool, and we need to consider that. So, again, I appreciate the comments and don't intend to try and get somebody to not throw out ideas. That was not my purpose, but by the same token, as we're throwing them out, I want to tell you that there's a broad base that we want to consider, and it is more than just about numbers.
Madam Chair, I'd also like to add a comment, and I think it kind of goes to your point. The way I'm looking at these numbers, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're kind of being lumped in with TREC as well.
When someone calls the 3001 number and they engage the call tree, at that point, when they choose between 1 or 1, 2, 3, or 5, those numbers get put into a pool of calls. Yes, you're right.
So the whole time includes both?
Both, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And so what I'm seeing here is that the calls coming into the appraisal licensing board are roughly 5 to 10% of the calls.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And that was why I was having the conversation with the commissioner, because I know that that's been a concern of the boards for a long time about if there's a way to do that. And if there is a way to do it, I think if we can do it and it meets what we need to in terms of able to do it technologically as well as within the budget, I think we need to move in that direction. I think it.
And it seems like that's kind of the main complaint we've been hearing lately. It's the complaint that we've heard from the Sunset Committee, from our license holders. And so I think that we need to look at that very closely as a board and review that and make determinations and take action. It appears to me that is probably one of, if not the most important issue we have before us. So I would recommend that we certainly look into that from a budgetary standpoint, from a technical standpoint, and address it head on and as expeditiously as possible.
Tony, I'd like to add to Alex's comments that I wholeheartedly agree with you on that, and tell us what you need.
Yes, sir.
I mean, that's and then we'll figure that part
Yes,
out. But actively, we as a board, I think, would like to know what are the things that the staff needs in general, so that we can improve that situation.
Right, and that's why I began that conversation with the commissioner, so we can get some ideas, look at what the pluses and minuses are, and present the board with a full picture of what that would take.
That sounds great, and I'm encouraged that this is at least in is somewhat innovative approach to try to improve the situation, and I commend you on that.
Thank you. Any other questions about the call center? Okay. Again, as I mentioned, while the focus has been on the call center, there are reasons why people are calling, so we're also trying to address those as well. And in terms of impact on the board, there's a couple of technological things that we're doing. As I mentioned in the report in October, one of the things we're looking to provide is an application status tracker. I would say one of the top 3, if not top 2 or 1, issues that people call about is they call and say, where are you on my X, whatever application. Right now we have on the website a web page that shows where the staff is in terms of processing certain application types, but they're not specific to a person's application. So we're working on putting something on the website that will be directed to specific individuals' applications. Right now, we're trying to implement that on the commission side for real estate agents. That's the largest group of people that would impact. Once we roll that out, we will start doing that incrementally towards other license types once we can make sure it works and everything's going the way it needs to. And that is a direction moving towards a more robust application portal and license holder portal for people to be able to actually sign in behind the wall and do a bunch of other things, as well as look at that particular information. Initially, it'll be on the front end of the website, and then we're looking to make it a little bit better as we progress. And I'll continue to provide updates on where we are on that. The other thing we're looking at doing is currently, and this is a frustration both from I believe the applicants, license holders, and staff, is that we receive documents we need for applications via email, fax, or mail, and that absolutely increases processing time as well as frustration. So we're looking at implementing an online service for people to be able to attach their documents electronically and do that through our online system. We're hoping to have that in place by the end of January, beginning of February. That's the time frame if everything goes the way it needs to. And that'll not only decrease application times, but hopefully will have an impact on why people are calling about their documents and have a direct impact on the call center as well. I want to make sure, I'm sorry, one final thing I want to mention before I either answer any additional questions or relinquish the mic is we did meet with the auditor. If you all recall, we had a phone audit or an audit done on the call center in June, and we wanted to make sure and meet with the auditor to follow up on the recommendations that were provided in that, and we did meet with them in early October, and they were pleased with the progress we were making. Obviously, it's early in the game, but they felt that we were moving in the right direction in doing what we were doing in terms of looking to add more staff as well as the technological things we've done to improve. And with that, I'll happy to answer any questions.
I'd just like to add just one more general comment. Having heard the sunset review, the hearing the other day, I would like to say from my standpoint, I've been here for about 2 years now, the customer service issue has been something that's been with us since I've been here. But I will say that what I've seen is that the staff has from since I began has consistently been working on this issue and looking for remedies, looking for ways to make things better. And so I want to commend you for that, because during the hearing I thought that sometimes the comments that were made were not entirely fair to the staff or to the board members, and the efforts that we've put forward to address this issue, at least in the last 2 years. And I think that the numbers are starting to show that progress, and I think they're heading in the right direction. That's going to continue to get better. But I did want to address that because there was a sense of unfairness to an extent with some of the comments that were made publicly.
Thank you. And any other questions?
No, I just have a comment.
Yes, sir.
So we're well recognized that you've taken on a new position at a difficult time, and there is progress being made. That's obvious. But for this board, and we talked about this in the workshop, and I've been outspoken about the comments I receive when I'm out in the public attending appraiser meetings, and I think it's difficult to defend some of the problems we have by saying, well, we're lumped in with all the realtors, and there's, according to Kristen, 184,000 of them, and there's only 6,000 appraisers. So listening to some of your comments about trying to identify ways that we can move appraisers toward maybe their own phone line, their own, answering their call specifically, and keep streamlining that is a good move, and we should try to continue to troubleshoot that and see if we can accomplish that. And like Board Member Bolton said, come to us with ideas, and even if there's cost involved, we can sit down and address if there is a feasible solution. I say feasible because it has to be feasible.
Yes, sir.
And I would encourage you to move forward on that. I mean, I understand your position, I understand the dynamics, but this is the appraisers licensing board, and and the stakeholders I answer to are the appraisers. I would like to be able to give them some real examples of how we're solving that problem.
Thank you.
But please understand, you came on, you took a position, we understand that there's issues that have to be resolved. We understand the challenge. I would probably go so far as to say that might even be why this position was created. I understand that. We have to address this customer service. We have to do better. We can, and I've said this before, the challenges are that our state is growing, the number of our stakeholders, at least, maybe not as many of appraisers are growing, but we know on the other side that that growth is substantial, and it does come with challenges. So I just want to thank you for taking this head on, and please let us know what we can do and what we need to address to really solve this problem. Progress is great, but we have to reach a point, I don't know if it's 3 minutes, I don't know what it is, but we have to reach a point where the complaints come to a minimum. There's always going to be complaints, but we have got to get them to an acceptable level.
I absolutely agree with you.
Thank you.
Sir.
And just from a leadership standpoint, because we are all engaged in trying to fix the problem, let's always remember to look at our budget, right? One of the reasons, maybe for public's benefit, and the appraisers out there that are listening's benefit, let's always remember that our budget, we don't have any cash outlay for those customer service people that we're queued up with right now. And that may mean along the way, as we discussed in our workshop, that as license holders and certification holders, that we end up needing to invest more in our industry by way of some kind of fee. We're always looking to cut things, right? And we've been successful in being able to be very conservative and maintain some dollars, but as a practicing professional, I have said to our budget chair this year, don't cut my fee $10, answer the phone rather than making me wait 10 minutes. And I think we can get that kind of commitment from the folks in the industry, but we need to start educating them about that we are focused on getting you increased customer service. We are focused on doing a better job. There may be a price that has to come with that, and that we need to start understanding that.
I just wanted to add that we have been focused on this since I've been here, and it's, the problem comes up, and we continue to hit it, and with all of you. So trying new solutions, trying new ways, whatever has to be. But, we have.
Madam Chair, I'd like to respond to your comments just briefly in saying, is anybody asking those questions of the stakeholders? How do they feel about if we can expand the budget or to improve customer service? And what do they say?
I think that's our job. I think that's why I made the toss out that I just did. I think we need to start putting our ear to the ground, and as we are receiving the concerns, we can express that. We are operating under a situation right now where technically none of your license fee is being paid to cover that issue. We are operating, and thank you to our fellow commissioners and decision makers that allow us to operate in the structure that we do with our MOU, our Memorandum of Understanding with the Texas Real Estate Commission. So while we have the downside that we've made the comment about, it is essentially a free service we're receiving. And as the complaints come to us, I think we need to be asking the question, what's it worth to be able to be more efficient? And again, I'm not talking about thousands of dollars. I'm not talking about raising licensing fees in some ridiculous way. I wouldn't support that. It wouldn't make sense. But that we do need to, as we look at this organization, in my opinion, and we look at the structure, you have got to always realize that the solutions come at a cost. And those costs, we know that as we're trying to process more efficiently, not just the phone call, but the license and the complaint and the experience audit, we know, if we've been sitting here very long and certainly have served in Clayton's position, that we operate a very tight budget. We don't have the benefit of huge increases of count. Our counts have stayed stable for a lot of years. In fact, there's been less than a 3% variance in the accounting of the opportunity for a revenue increase. And so when we think about the great job our staff has been doing, but the fact that we have some that are at senior stages of their careers, the fact that we really feel like we need more bodies, and now we're talking about, again, adding more bodies, we're going to have to figure out how to balance those dollars or accept something less than what you're wanting. And I think we've made a commitment that we don't wish to accept something less. So we're going to have a focused approach on how we generate more money. Yes, sir.
I just thank you. And thank you for all of that. I think is a great a sense that we got from the board, which is what we want and welcome. The commitment that I wanted to make to you, and this is just to echo the urgency that I hear in dealing with this issue, is that we will very quickly get to the bottom of what the technical capabilities of the system are and determine if in fact that it can be done. Obviously, outside of, there are lots of different ways it can be done. But we will look at the options that are available to dedicate both access, identify the clients, and get them to a dedicated resource. And we will bring you what those options are and what the costs of those options are, and let you make the decision on whether or not that's a path you want to go down.
Thank you. That will be a great help.
One final question, the 20 or the 16 current employees and the 4 that we're looking to add, is that the entire call center for both TREC and the Appraisal Licensing Board, or is that, those are 20 dedicated to our calls exclusively?
That's the entire call center.
Okay.
And we haven't been staffed up that high in a long time, nor for a sustained period of time. So we don't really have an idea of if that's the right number or not. Obviously, we'll be able to look at that and see if we need to add more staff, and that's the goal, is to make sure that the call center is not only staffed up high enough to answer calls on a regular basis, but to deal with any people calling in, any sick. You don't want the performance of the call center to go down just because you're not staffed up to handle people not being able to come in. So that's the goal. We want to see if 20 is the right number. If it is, great. If not, then we'll reassess that and go from there.
Well, keeping in mind, and again, you all do a great job of that, if there's a reason why, oftentimes there's a reason why you can't stay staffed up.
Mm-hmm.
And that is because the job is either too stressful, doesn't pay enough, or has some limitation. And so we want to, keeping that in mind, we need to be staffed up to the point that it's not such a stressful situation that you literally can't leave your desk
Absolutely.
Without creating a problem for the guy sitting next to you.
Absolutely. No, that is a if I may just publicly comment, that is a difficult job, to have to answer the phone all day and to deal with people who are upset and
who are smiling and saying, "Hey, it's a great day in Texas, and I've held for 10 minutes, and I have a problem with my license
Absolutely.
renewal, and it affects my life."
Right, and they do a great job, but it is a difficult job. So we recognize that as well. So.
Madam Chair, I've got a comment. One thing I noticed within the Sunset Commission, to me, it seemed the underlying insinuation was the board and then the commission on a larger scale made the decision to set aside funds for property that could have been utilized or should have been utilized to grow that piece of the puzzle. That's the insinuation I got from the entirety of the process, that they slapped us on the hand for doing that because we should have been focused more on the other side of the equation. So from a budgetary standpoint, those funds now may be available that had once been set aside. And it was discussed in the budget committee meeting that, to me, it just, we can wrangle over the smaller costs, but it seemed to me that what they wanted us to decide was no longer go in that direction until you're able to take care of your day-to-day operational issues.
And I agree that that's certainly the way I read it as well. Again, keeping in mind that that was a report that was combined, right? And when you look at the dollars that this particular board both had available and actually committed to that building, it is a very small number.
Yes.
Simply for the very reason I mentioned. We don't have revenue swings on the increased side, and so we were, in the whole scheme of things, a relatively small
Yes.
percentage
I don't think they
of
made that distinction. I think they just pooled us
They did.
all together.
And so keeping that in mind, even if you take the bulk of all the money that we set aside, which we have an obligation at the moment, we're operating under an MOU, a decision that this board and previous board makeups have made to be a a contributor into that building. We would need to change some things if this board or future board seated here desired to do something different. But if we choose to do that, it's not a lot of money and won't carry us very far when you think about our ability to even add one person at the level of employment that we need from a technical expertise standpoint. If you think about adding one more person with the expertise to be able to do experience logs. In my viewpoint, and again, I'd encourage us each to look individually. That's why we're sitting here. I don't think you've got enough to fund somebody much more than a year or so, and then you're going to have to, maybe 2, and then you're going to have to figure out how to generate those dollars from some other resource. And so, again, we just have to keep those things in mind. Great dig in, though. That's exactly what we need to be doing. We need to be digging in and figuring this out.
Any other questions? Thank you. I'm going to now, Amy Jasper's going to come up and give the RCS reports.
Thank you, Tony.
Good morning. I'm Amy Jasper from the Reception and Communication Services. I'm excited to introduce our newest team member, Arthur Sines. Arthur began his employment with the agency as a customer service representative on August 1st, 2018. Arthur has previously worked for the state of Texas, as well as several mortgage companies. He enjoys talking to people and being able to assist them with their inquiries. He loves spending every free moment he has with his 2 sons and teaching them to love everything involving Marvel superheroes, the Dallas Cowboys, and the Texas Longhorns. Please help me welcome Arthur Sines. Please refer to the first C1 report. This information is for comparison of fiscal year 2017 and 2018. In fiscal year 2018, there were 10,000 more calls handled than in fiscal year 2017. You will notice a reduction in the number of people assisted in all 3 categories in fiscal year 2018. We would like to remind you of the robocall attack in fiscal year 2017, which attributed to the significantly increased number of incoming calls to the main line for fiscal year 2017. The next 2 reports are the C2 reports for comparison of fiscal year 2017 and 2018. All survey submissions for fiscal year 2017 who provided written comments and contact information have been contacted and are resolved. The next 2 reports are the C3 reports for comparison of fiscal year 2017 and 2018. We have made a substantial improvement in the average time it takes to handle a call. We do recognize that the average hold time increased significantly following the implementation of VoIP in 2017. Please notice the last quarter of fiscal year 2018 has significantly improved from the last quarter of fiscal year 2017. This improvement is associated with the implementation of the call tree system in June and the optional callback feature in August. The average hold time currently includes customers who have opted for a return call, even though the calls are not on hold. The next report is the C4 report. This report offers a comparison for the calls handled, abandoned, and received for fiscal year 2018. Please note that we're trending in the right direction due to the positive changes beginning in June with the call tree system and the courtesy callback feature in August. The next report is the C1 report for fiscal year 2019. In the month of September, we received 19,428 calls, of which approximately 5% of those calls were for TALCB. We assisted 206 walk-ins, of which 8 were for TALCB, and we responded to 5,291 emails, of which 239 pertained to TALCB. The next report is the C2 report for fiscal year 2019. In the month of September, we received 41 responses to our customer service survey. 3 of the 41 surveys were submitted by appraisers. All 3 were submitted without comments and were submitted anonymously. 13 of the overall responses provided written comments and contact information for their response. While not noted on the report, RCS has reached out and responded to all 13 of those individuals. The top 3 issues for the month of September were related to customer service, information displayed on the website, and application processing. I would also like to report that whenever someone left a comment related to customer service, 75% of those comments were positive. Whenever someone mentioned a staff member by name, the percentage increased to 100%. This concludes my report. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes, Amy, thanks for being here today. We appreciate your report. So I'm looking at the C3 call averages between fiscal year 17 and 18, and I understand the measures taken to reduce the wait time, but could you give me some clarification on how we reduced the time it takes to handle the call or the length of the call? How did we get from 22 to a consistent 6? What happened?
I believe that has to do with the call tree system, where people that have the easier questions can be addressed more quickly. If all they need is help logging in, they go to the associate, they can get them resolved, and then they can move on. So the ones that are in call queue 5, for example, are labeled as other. So those might take longer because they have a lot more questions.
So by having the customer call in and self-direct himself or themselves, that is what you're saying probably accounted for a large portion of that reduction.
Correct.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Amy, thanks for jumping from the frying pan into the fire. It's very brave of you to take on the leadership role in a place where we've got a lot of focus, and so we do appreciate that. I'm just curious, or I guess I have a comment. The reports that are before the board right now generally give us statistical data up through August, and we are in a dynamically changing situation. In other words, we recognize our staff is making great strides and working on lots of things, and we get a bit of a report from Tony, but in terms of receiving the report the next time, is there a way for us to, I'm assuming you're tracking these numbers all the time, so is there a way for us to get a more real-time report?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We might consider that again. I think we're going to be giving you, and you already have taken on a lot of extra workload, so I'm not interested in creating another report or another workload item. But if they are out there somewhere, I believe this board for at least the next 12 months is going to be interested in as real a time as we can get information. So thanks for what you provided for us. And I'm sorry to have to ask you that question the very first time you make a presentation, but I do appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
I would just
Madam
comment briefly that from what I can tell on report C2, you'll notice that in July and August, hold time fell off the chart here as far as the top 3 comments, whereas hold time is in the top 3 in all the previous months. Is that correct?
I believe so. I would need to go back and review the surveys and the comments submitted.
And it looks like on C2, hold time is on here for September for this fiscal year, but it would appear to be the 4th item commented on. So it fell out of the top 3. So it looks like there's some progress being made there.
There were 2 months when it wasn't in the top 3, correct?
Are there any other questions or comments?
Madam Chair and board members, I just wanted to address Madam Chair's comments about asking for real-time updates in these reports. And the reports that you see before you for all of our directors and divisions, at this time in the November meeting, they provide you a year-over-year comparison of the fiscal year that we just completed, of ending August 31st, and the previous fiscal year. So that's why you have two reports, one from fiscal year 17 and one from fiscal year 18, that only go up through August. In addition to that, you have a 1-month report from the month of September. And due to the timing of running all of those reports and getting them posted and sent out to you in the materials, we're able to provide you up through September at the November meeting. And we can certainly, as the chair has requested, provide you the additional month's reports like October and November as those become available. And I think that's what the commissioner committed to doing in his report whenever those reports are processed and filed and put up on our website, that we would send you a link to those reports so that you can see those on a real-time basis.
So I appreciate the comments, and I do recognize that we've got a year over year. I want you to recognize a couple of things. We're receiving a lot of information within about an 8 or 10 day period of time. And so to the degree that in the assemblage of the notebook, and again, I want to be clear, if what I'm asking for creates a half a day's work for someone, that is not what I'm interested in. But if they do exist, real time, maybe simply the extra page of the month report that's already existing somewhere else gets dropped in the same notebook that I'm carrying around. The link helps me, but I'm running a business every day. I get 300 emails a day, and so I can pull up the link and I can see it real time, but it requires me then to print it off, stick it somewhere, because I need to touch paper person. Now, again, if that request is exclusive of me, I'm not trying to create work. I can figure a way out. I'll just forward it to my staff, tell them to print it, put it in the stack, and then they'll put it over in my notebook. It's not a problem for me to handle it that way. But as we're trying to direct you and make decisions, I think it is helpful to the degree we can right now while we're focused on call center stuff to get real-time information in an assembled format that we can look at it all at one time.
I will. I don't think it'll be an issue to drop something in the book. It'll be as of the day the book goes, and then we'll make a commitment to the extent we can to follow up with an oral update at the time of the meeting if we can't do it graphically at that time, just so that you do have as close to real-time numbers as possible.
Yeah, and I'm not asking for, boy, on yesterday, how did we do? I don't think that's realistic, but maybe within a 15-day window of our board.
Well, as I was able to do in talking about the numbers for this month, I ran those this morning. So
Sure.
In terms of presenting orally, I don't think it's a difficult thing to do.
As much as anything, I want the board to understand that what I'm asking for, I think, is more for your benefit in terms of being able to answer the questions that you're being asked and to provide real-time information. So if today all you had available to you was your year-over-year report, that's different information than last week we were down to 6 minutes, right? And it may not be consistent. I think that's what we're looking for. I think that's what Tony's also looking at, and certainly our board member Renfro has mentioned that we're trying to find an ideal number, right? While we may not have as cyclical a up and down process of people signing up to be real estate appraisers, the way they renew and the telephone calls do probably come in a cyclical nature, and we're trying to study that so we can understand it as we give you direction. And so thank you for that.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, I will hand it over to Gwen Jackson.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and board members. Gwen Jackson, Director of Education and Licensing Services. If you would first turn your attention to the report in your meeting material for the number of active certifications and licenses. This is broken out for you by fiscal year, month, as well as license type. The total number of active certifications and licenses as of the end of September are found at the bottom of the report in the second column from your right, and it totals 6,172. During the past year, our appraiser totals remained consistent with slight fluctuations from month to month. We also continue to see an upward trend in our number of appraiser trainees, as found in the fourth column from your right, totaling 956, which is 73 more than our total for September of 2017. Are there any questions on this report? Our next report is of the Appraisal Management Company, or AMC, registrations. This report has been modified to provide you only pertinent information, such as the total number of applications received, the total number of registrations issued, and the total number of AMC renewals that have issued. The bottom half of this report provides the number of registrations that have issued from the March 2012 AMC program implementation date to September of this year, which is 258. It then subtracts those that have expired, surrendered, or been revoked, which brings us to a total of 169 AMC registrations. I'd also like to point out that we are processing AMC renewals upon receipt to ensure that they remain active and that there is no lapse in their ability to conduct business. Are there any questions on this report? The next report is the L1 report, which provides fiscal year comparisons of the number of original applications received, licenses issued, and renewal activity. The numerical columns of the report show comparisons between last year to date ending August 2017 and this year to date ending August 2018. We received 175 more original applications this year than last year, reflecting almost a 19% increase in original applications received. Moving down to the line items beneath the heading entitled Licenses Issued from Renewal Applications, last fiscal year, August, 3,140 timely renewal licenses were issued timely, compared to 3,057 who timely renewed year ending August 2018, for a 2.6% decrease. If there are no questions on this report, we can move to the next report, which is of September, which is the beginning of our new fiscal year. And this report compares our totals with the beginning of fiscal year 2017 for 1 month. And if there are any questions regarding this report, I'd be happy to answer them as well. The next report in your material is of our examination activity. The fiscal year ending results of examination pass rates from September 2017 through August of 2018 are presented for your review. A total of 254 examinations were administered with an overall pass rate of 59.4%. The pass rates for each license type are provided there for you as well. On the following page, you'll find a fiscal year-end over year-end comparison between 2017 and 2018. Are there any questions on this report? Then moving forward, the next and last report is of examination activity for the month of September, only. During September, 34 examinations were administered with an overall pass rate of 58.8%. And then a comparison of this September's pass rates with the pass rate of September in 2017, those are provided for you on the next page. This concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Steve Spiropoulos, ITS Division Director. Before I begin my report, there is a buzzing sound, so if you could just make sure that you all have all your mics turned off unless you're speaking, that'd be great. Just trying to make it so that they can hear us, right? So before I go over the I-1 and I-2 reports, I'd like to give a report about where we're at with our technology initiative. So currently, right now, we are looking at hiring 3 positions as contractors in the IT division to handle the projects that have made the high priority list. And those projects are primarily focused on providing better customer service to our online users so they can have tools, so they can do things automatically. Some of those tools have been described by Deputy Commissioner Tony Slagle. And then the other part of those projects deals with automating processes in the back office, so making staff's life easier and being able to do things less manually and more automatically. So those are the 2 main goals for those technology projects. And at the present time, we've completed a few interviews for these positions, and the interviews will be concluded on December 6th, at which point we will make our selections and hopefully get those folks hired in and around the new year so that they can start working on supplementing our existing staff. So that's the update for the technology projects. And now I will go over the I-1 report, which shows you how our website is being, how often our website's being visited and how many applications and renewals are being done online versus on paper. Now, before I go into the detail, I will just mention that the detail at the top part of the page where it says website, those statistics historically were gathered on an older system that gathered website statistics. What we've done now is we've migrated to Google Analytics. Google tracks for us all the visits to our website. It's standard on any website you have. You can pay Google a fee and they will track your visitors for you. And it's a very powerful tool, and it's also a lot more precise than the tool we were using before. So we've gone in and we've updated our numbers for the prior fiscal year to date and for the current fiscal year to date, as well as the current month. And going forward, what we present to you will be statistics that come from Google and not from our older legacy tracking system. In addition to that, at the end of my presentation, Christine Anderson will go through some more detailed website statistics for you so that you can see who's visiting our site, where they are, and kind of relevant information for that. So if we take our previous fiscal year to date, which was just September of 17, and compare it to this September, we've gone up from 48,000 to 49,000 total pages viewed. Our total monthly unique visits goes from 14,000, just a little bit above 14,000, to above 15,000. So traffic to the TALCB website is steadily increasing over time. When we look at our online utilization, so we look at the prior month of September, it's 43% for applications versus 71% for this last September. And renewals were at 98, now they're at 95, and everybody's always using the panel management tool online at 100% for both reported months. The next report is the I-2 report, and that report will show you statistics doing a trend analysis over a year. So when we look at our applications, you've got utilization above 40% for the whole period, peaking up to around 70% for the last month reported, which is September of 2018. And for renewals, it's much higher than that. It's usually above 85%, and we're trending upwards where we're at 95% for the last month reported. And our panel management is always, again, throughout that whole period, showing 100% utilization. The factors that lead to using our online tools rather than paper have to do with people's increasing adherence to technology and wanting to deal less with paper. I have mentioned this to you before. I believe at this time we have an opportunity to probably eliminate paper applications and get people to use the online tools exclusively. But that requires quite some changes to some rules. Any questions? Okay, thank you. And now Christine Anderson will present the Google statistics.
He's a lot taller than me. Seriously, very tall. Good morning, or afternoon, I should say. My name is Christine Anderson. I am the Public Affairs and Communications Manager for the Texas Real Estate Commission and the Appraiser Board. Many of you guys might not know me, so I thought I would take a chance to kind of introduce myself, as well as give you a little bit of information about what I do for the board and for the commission. So I am in charge of all external communications for our agencies. That includes our newsletter, social media, the website content, anything that you can think of that you're seeing that's going out to our license holders. I'm in charge of not necessarily writing everything, but ensuring consistency and making sure that everything's done in a timely manner. So that's the majority of what I do at the agency. I did want to say before I start, if you have any questions or feel like I'm using words that you're not understanding, by all means raise your hand. This content was new to me when I started learning it, and you know, if you have questions, please by all means ask. Sometimes I tend to use words that maybe might not always be that obvious. So that getting started. Why are we presenting this information to you guys? Well, a lot of our feedback got sunset and other topics. Feedback from the board we've gotten is worries about communications and customer service. And myself and IT, when discussing kind of ways to present this information, now that we're using Google Analytics, we thought we'd take the opportunity to kind of give you some insight about how our website's being used and other communications efforts we're making. So the first report you're looking at right here is a visual representation. The chart that you're looking at the top is a visual representation of our users year over year, the orange being our previous year and blue being this year. You can see we have a pretty consistent, although slightly higher number this year, except for one very high peak there in July. That is probably related to some sort of bot attack that we had on our website. Someone trolling for information, maybe license holder information, something like that, in that time period. So that's why there's a spike there. We're going to continue to look at that, make sure there's nothing of concern. But I did want to try to explain that anomaly to you. Moving down the page, you can see our number of users year over year. Again, the high increase in percentage of users, showing 95% increase, again, is probably related to that bot attack, that spike, that huge number of users from that small period of time. So hopefully next year's year over year, you guys will see a little bit more consistent number of users. Again, scrolling down towards the bottom of this page, you can see something that's really interesting is we can see where people are coming from to access our website. New York City seems like a very odd top place, but again, related to that bot attack that we had the year before, this year, it's more than likely that, as you can see in 2017, we had only 2% of people accessing our website, and then in 2018, it was 43%, again, probably related to that bot attack. So the other two next largest user bases being from our two largest metro areas does seem to be more explainable. Does anyone have any questions about this report, what the numbers mean?
I do have one.
Yeah, absolutely.
With related to possibility of some type of cyber attack, is there a possibility of breach of personal information that we are aware of, or there's a possibility of? Can you maybe just kind of walk us through that?
That's an excellent question. I can answer a really overview, and then if you have more detailed questions on top of that, I'm sure our ITS director can probably answer more about that. But I know that our public information, that license holder search, which is probably why they were accessing our website, has information that's publicly available anyway. No private user information is held on our website at all. So they wouldn't be able to access anything other than names of our license holders and their license numbers. So things like social security numbers, things like that, that is not on our website in any way, nor would they be able to access it.
So are you saying bot attack?
Yes.
All right, just for clarification.
Bot.
So why would they be after our website anyway? I mean,
I will hand that over to Steve.
I can answer that. So what happens is, have you ever heard the term analytics?
Certainly.
Right. So what companies will do is they'll create a little program that goes and scans a website that's presenting a database. And they're going to scan that database for information that they want. They're going to gather all that information, and they're going to go do something with it. So, for example, an advanced program can be written to scan the appraiser database, look at where a high volume of people have recently applied for appraisal licenses. Okay, just an example. And then target that audience for a marketing campaign. So our website is open to allow people to search for information about who's licensed. And we don't block these bots typically because they're harmless. They go in, they do their search, and they leave. In this particular case in July, there was an intrusive bot that decided to visit us and cause our systems to slow down because the volume of searching and the volume of data they were pulling was very large. So we blocked it, and we took precautions to make sure that that type of bot wouldn't be allowed to come back and do the same thing to us again. So we've adjusted. Okay? But in general, what we do is to prevent this kind of thing from becoming an issue, we would put what's called a honeypot, which is like, hey bot, come and look at this, and then it gets trapped in that honeypot, and then it can't affect us. We've also done that to take precautions for the future as well.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
It's a good explanation.
Do you guys have any other questions about this first report?
Leery of those.
Okay, moving on to the next report. Again, as I stated before, one of my primary jobs at the agency is external communications, and one of our initiatives we took on was improving those communications. About a year ago, we implemented a tool, I'm sorry, was it 2 years ago? A tool called GovDelivery. It's a service we pay for that allows us to effectively email our license holders. They manage a database of our license holders' emails, and then we can select and target specific groups based on topics they're interested in to the license type and location that they are. If you've been to our website and you get that slide up pop-up that says sign up for our newsletter, that's the GovDelivery tool, and you can go in and sign up for it. We also automatically upload all of our license holders via what we call an API process, an automatic database update to this system as well, so that we can email any of our license holders at any time. So that being said, this report you're looking at is a really broad overview of statistics from our usage from the last year of that tool. And something that I wanted to highlight for you is, again, this is an overview for both TREC and TALCB, and us using the tool as a whole. But you can see, so combined between the two agencies, we have about 190,000 license holders. And that chart that you're looking at starts at 250,000 license holders and increases over the year to almost 300,000 license holders. Or not license holders, users, excuse me for my misstatement there. So that means that not only do we have all of our license holders subscribed to all of our communications, but we have quite a bit of maybe members of the public, press, consumers that are all interested in our information, and they are using our tool to get that information. So I thought you guys might find that to be interesting and encouraging that people are actually using and subscribing to this messaging service. Next key data that you would be interested in is the engagement rate you're looking at there. That's that 53.5%. And they do explain that's the percentage of recipients who opened or clicked on a link in the bulletin. They call an email a bulletin in the last 90 days prior to when I ran this report. On average, anecdotally, most marketing services that are sending out an email are expecting about a 20 to 25% rate of engagement in their emails. 53% is extraordinarily high. That means that we're, as an agency, doing an excellent job of targeting our audiences, identifying their needs and wants, and presenting them the content that they're interested in. So I wanted you guys to know that we are not only utilizing this tool, but we're using it in a really excellent manner. It's great feedback. You can also see, 2.2 million impressions on our information. That's a really great engagement rate. So with that, I just kind of wanted to give you guys a brief overview and remind you, this data, these two tools, both of them have extensive reporting capabilities. Google Analytics has extensive amount of information. If I haven't presented information that you're interested in today, this is my first attempt at it. So please, by all means, either reach out, say something today, ask me the questions. I am fairly positive that if I can't present that answer for you today, that we can create a report for you in the future that would give you that information. So in addition, I did want to remind you all that in addition to these two tools, that we regularly update our social media profiles. We have a Facebook page and a Twitter that we use, specifically a TALCB Facebook page, and then a Twitter that we share with Trek as well. So, and both have had an increase, a steady increase in engagement and users, likes, followers on both of those tools over the last year. And we've actually increased the amount of content that we're regularly publishing on those pages, including Facebook town halls. I'm not sure if any of you guys have had a chance to attend those. Our general counsels have been excellent in assisting me, Mr. Oldmixon, in sitting down, identifying a topic. Maybe it's a new rule change or a hot topic that seems to be being discussed on social media. We'll identify that using these metrics and create a content based on that, including maybe a Facebook town hall where people can sit down and ask us questions and engage in it. And I used this example yesterday with the commission. Sometimes we maybe only have 50, 100, 200 people on a live session. But those sessions then are recorded and saved on our YouTube page and on our Facebook page, and then reshared, rewatched, and they're available as a great resource for our license holders to refer back to. In addition, I will give credit to TALCB's enforcement team. They've been really great about reaching out and working with me and creating great content for you guys that helps clarify in a new way information. We just did a video with Troy that explains our complaint process, and he did a great job, and we're sharing that, and it's out there for your license holders to use and understand. So just wanted you guys to know that we're actively reaching out to your license holders and the public and trying to educate them, and we think we're doing a pretty good job. So please let me know if you have any questions. And again, thank you for having me here today.
Thank you for the report. And we always knew Troy was a movie star.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. Is there a reason why we share the Twitter page with Trek?
No specific reason other than when that handle was created, it was created jointly, and we've just continued it. I would be happy to investigate creating a separate Twitter account for TALCB separate from the commission, although I will say that the engagement of having one account for both maybe allows us to have a little bit more flexibility in overlapping content and sharing it. But obviously we can always just retweet something that Trek posts that you want on the TALCB handle. It's completely up to the board if that's a recommendation you'd like to make.
Yeah, I guess it would just be, I have a little bit of experience with Twitter, but I guess what you want is to have the most people engaged, and I don't know which would be the best strategy. It might be that both of them together would be the best strategy, because then. Yeah. And the other thing is that I noticed that when you're engaged with Twitter, your Google search the search engine actually puts you at a higher level as well.
Yes.
When you Google, say, appraisals or whatever.
Well, that's what we call SEO, search engine optimization. So on our website, we actually consistently use language throughout the website that would promote our website higher in a Google search to ensure that if somebody were to put in Texas Appraiser, that would be the first website they get, because our website is saturated with that kind of content. So same thing, yes.
Anyway, just a thought, maybe if it would be more beneficial, I'll leave it to the experts.
I am no expert. I try to be, and I'm learning, and I'm pretty good. I wouldn't, but I can say that I could definitely get you some information about that for the next report, and maybe give you guys some insight on that. I can say, just thinking through this right now, the opportunity to share the same kind of content I typically do on Facebook. So you guys, so TALCB has a Facebook page and Twitter, and Trek does, and I typically actually share TALCB articles on Trek and Trek on TALCB, or I try to when I think that the content might be interesting to the opposite party. So it couldn't hurt. I don't think it necessarily hurts to have them in the same stream on Twitter. Although, again, if you'd like to have its own account, I'd be happy to research that and find out what you think is the best, or what may be the best approach.
I'll pose that question to board member Jim Jeffries, who I understand is the
Twitter
one with the
expert.
most
big Twitter
experience
user.
in social
Yeah.
media.
I was going to say you could improve the percentage of folks interacting with the website if we would get our generally certified appraisers to turn in their applications on the internet instead.
Do you guys have any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'm going to beg an indulgence of our staff and the public that's here. Based on the number of people that have left the room on and off, I suspect that we need a break. So it's about 2 minutes until 1 o'clock. Let's take about a 10-minute break, please. Assembling so efficiently. It is about 10 minutes after. We are back in session, and we are still continuing staff reports. I believe our next report is staff services. Is that correct?
Good afternoon. Priscilla Pifo, Director of Staff and Support Services. And I have 4 reports for you this morning. The first one is the August budget status report. What that shows you is 1 year's worth of expenditures and revenue. This is closing out the year. You'll notice that our total expenditures were about 8% less than what we had budgeted. We spent less than we had expected to, and revenues exceeded expectations by about $184,000, which leaves us to the good of $302,042, which is about 10% above what we had anticipated. Keeping in mind that even numbered years are where the higher revenues recur, which is why we have a carry forward allocation in the budgeting process. And then I'll move, if there's no questions, to this month's budget status report. Our budget status reports are a accumulated month snapshot. And so the August one for each year is a total year's look. This one is just 1 month, and it's the first month of the year. So you'll know that we're about right where we would expect to be, just about 91% of expenditures and 92% of revenue. Any questions on the budget? If not, I will move on to our our investment reports. The investment report for TALCB operating account, you'll note, includes our reserve amounts at the bottom. We also had 1 note that matured that we reinvested. And on the next report, I have the reserve fund balances. You'll note that the education reserve balance lists the administrative penalties for each fiscal year, which is how this reserve is funded. Expenditures of $48,000 included travel expenses for the year. The education reserve is included in the investment policy, which you will be addressing later in this meeting. And explicitly within the new proposed investment policy, you are excluding explicitly travel for the education reserve. The long-term facilities master plan reserves has incurred no expenses. You will also be reviewing that within the investment and reserve policy later in this meeting, where you have within the last meeting voted to suspend this reserve, and it is explicitly stated there. As per our investment policy, I'd like to certify that all of our investment officers have received the required training as designated by the Public Funds Investment Act, the PFIA. This includes board members who are required to take training when they initially come onto the board, as well as staff who is required to have training every 2 years. And that concludes my reports, unless you have questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members. Troy Bollier, Director of Standards and Enforcement Services. Before I go into my regular reports, I'd like to provide you 2 items very quickly. First, I'm very pleased to introduce the newest member of our team, Pat Mitchell, who joined the agency in mid-September. He goes by Pat, and Pat is our newest investigator, appraiser, and he has a background, obviously, in commercial appraising. Longtime appraiser, started his career in Amarillo, actually almost crossing paths with one of our other investigators who started their career in Amarillo. And Pat has a very diverse background that includes both commercial, industrial, agricultural, as well as residential and AMC work. So we're very excited to have him on board and have been putting him to work, getting him trained up. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Mitchell. The other item that I wanted to address up front before I go into my regular reports is a little bit of an update for you on experience audits, which I know is on your mind and of concern. What I wanted to share is, Mr. Bolton alluded earlier that we're trying to be very innovative and aggressive with several initiatives to work on improving the experience audit process all around and reducing the turn times, because that truly is probably the most customer service oriented aspect of what the Standards and Enforcement Services Division provides to stakeholders. And in that regard, we're doing a lot of innovative things. As Mr. Bolton mentioned, we're working on a call monitoring program. We're working on having a mentor roundtable with the staff and mentors probably in January. My staff's working on some innovative solutions to seeing how we can streamline processes to reduce times. And the other initiative, which you heard about obviously in August, is the independent contractors that we have engaged to work on the commercial backlog. Right now we have 97 experience audits that are with the division, and we've isolated a certain number of those that are in most need of attention and shunted them over to the independent contractors. We have 3 right now, although we're looking to fill 2 additional spots. And so we're working aggressively to funnel those through. And so far about 25% of what we have been able to funnel to the contractors has been completed and returned. And so we're hoping to obviously improve the turn times. The 2 biggest factors, I will say, obviously, and I know at least one of these things I've mentioned before, being 6 months basically from mid-March of last year until mid-September without a second commercial appraiser is a huge loss. And that was very significant. And unfortunately, the timing of that was not good. What I did run and found very interesting was that, in May 1st of 2018, the Appraisal Qualifications Board changed the qualifications criteria and lowered many of the requirements. Well, as you can imagine, that created quite a bit of a bump in terms of the volume of applications and therefore the volume of experience audits. What I did is I ran figures for the 6 months prior to May 1st and the 6 months after May 1st, just recently, and found a 94% increase. Basically, the 6 months prior, we had 64 experience audits come in, and then the 6 months starting May 1 through the end of October, we had 124. It was an average of 10.66 per month in the prior period and 20.66 the most recent 6 months. And I have looked at the October figures because we're obviously trying to stay on top of this. That trend is continuing. The preliminary figures for October show that we've had about 20 come in this month. I will say, though, that our efforts are bearing fruit and things are improving. We exceeded meaningfully the number of experience audits that we were able to close in October compared to fiscal year 18's average. So we're making headway there. So I'm going to continue to try and keep you updated regularly, certainly at the meetings, because I know this is an important, critical aspect of the services we provide to our license holders. Moving on to the regular reports, I'll show you here the E1 report, and you can see a little bit of the connection to what I was saying about the experience audit volume and the staff's response. What I'd like to point out on this report, obviously at the bottom left we have about 221 active matters, but if you look on the left-hand side, the top half, you'll see the top half of the report is incoming matters, and at the far left-hand side there you've got the two grade columns for 2017 and 18, and you can see there the total volume of complaints for those prior 2 years, 175 and 166. So there's been very little change, if you will, in complaint volume coming in. But what has changed, and I want you to note, is the box right underneath that. For 2017, we had 175 audits, and 139 audits, and then that went up in 2018 to 186. So it was basically about a 33% increase from FY17 to 18. Then if you look underneath that for the closed cases, the bottom half of the report, you'll see the percent and the numbers for closed complaints has actually grown quite a bit. We went from 158 in 17 to 218, which is almost a 40% increase. And then similarly for experience audits, we've really been focusing on that area. We went from 112 resolved to 158, and that's about a 40% increase. So I want you to know the staff's working very hard to do the best we can, be the most efficient with the resources we have, and obviously focus on that customer service aspect with those audits. The next report I have for you is the AMC E1 report. There is very little activity to report here. No incoming complaints through the month of September. I will tell you, though, that in October, I do believe we've received one. So you might notice a slight change in the numbers with the when the October report gets posted to the website. The next report is total open complaints by fiscal year. And we're working obviously very hard to stay on top of cases that are aging. And so obviously 2017 cases we want to make sure we get closed out. And as you can see that through the end of September, there's 6 of those. We've made significant progress on those. I think the biggest thing is that some of them have been resolved, some of them have moved into the SOA, the litigation process. And then, of course, there's at least one that we've recently reassigned, mainly because we've been focusing on the experience audits, and I expect that one to get resolved within the next 30 days. So we're trying to obviously push forward on the experience audits, but also balancing those polarities of, yeah, we have complaints and we don't want them to get old. You can see the total over 1-year-old cases, and I realize that has gone from 3 to 8 as of September 30th. But again, just to remind you, some of those Well, one of those has already been closed, and some of them did suffer from abatement due to pending litigation. And like I said, some of them have recently, it's not reflected here, but they recently now are at the SOA hearing process. So we're trying to make headway and be mindful that we don't want the complaints to get old. The next report I have gives you an idea about complaint resolutions, and you've got the prior fiscal year there to take a look at. And you can see we've got 228 total complaints resolved for last fiscal year. And basically this, the percentage breakdown is still historically trending basically the same, that basically about 2/3 of the cases are resulting in some form of a dismissal, and then about 1/3 are some form of discipline, whether it's actually litigated, agreed, or on a default basis. And you can see last year we had a little bit of a spike in the default, the number of cases by default. Underneath the pie chart, you can see the steady trend seems to be continuing, at least for the last several years, of basically about 0.5% of all total license holders are end up being disciplined. So again, we're talking about a very small cross-section of the actual license holder base that are getting a complaint, and then even smaller percentage are actually getting disciplined. The right-hand side, I did want to point out a change that you will see going forward. Both of these figures here for 2017 and 18 reflect the recidivism rate. And what I mean by that is, do we have an appraiser who's been disciplined and then has another discipline? And the way traditionally, up until the present, that we've determined that is the formula was, have they been disciplined, that second or third time? Have they been disciplined during the current fiscal year or the 2 prior ones? So basically, we take a 3-year look back to see if they've had discipline before, and if they are, then they're considered recidivist. And so you can see in FY18, that's about 8.8%. Starting September 1st, so when you see the report going forward, please understand we've made a change to try and align that logic. As you may know, the board's penalty matrix, which I know you have in your materials, provides for a 7-year period when we're considering where someone falls on the matrix in terms of whether they've had past discipline. That's a 7-year period. And so after discussions with senior management, we decided that aligning this recidivism period with that number probably made more sense. So going forward, just understand you may see a change in the percentage because we're changing the window that we're looking at. The next report I have in front of you is complaint resolutions for FY 2019. Yes, that is a big green dot. And that's because we only have 1 month of data, and as I said earlier, we've really been trying to focus on experience audits. I am happy to report, though, that I've looked at the October data, and we've made significant improvements in October in terms of complaint resolution volume. It's up almost double compared to FY 18's average for any monthly average. So a little bit of a blip here while we're trying to focus on audits. But you can see basically we had 3 dismissals that were either insufficient or non-jurisdictional. The next report I have for you is a graphical representation of the E1 report, basically giving you an idea. It's broken down by license type and by fiscal year. So you can see there FY18 on the far right, and you can see the breakdown in terms of the numbers for the different license categories that the board oversees. And then the final report I wanted to touch on, and I'll note I've made some changes here, which I'll discuss. This report gives you a sense of complaints that are generated as a result of the experience audit process. And that's been a concern that's been mentioned by stakeholders and board members, and I hope this data is reassuring that it's a very rare occurrence where that happens. So on the left, you have the bar chart, and you've got the last 4 fiscal years. Obviously, the newest year, FY19, has no staff-initiated complaints as of yet. And then on the right-hand side, you've got some data and a couple of pie charts. You can see there at the top, 18 out of a total of 576 complaints. And what that means is out of all the complaints that were initiated during this time period, only 18 of them, or 3.31%, were coming from an experience audit. So the vast majority are someone, whether it's a consumer, a financial institution, whatever. And so you can see in the pie chart below that 97%, all that orange, are not coming from experience audits. When you pull out that small 3%, you get a little bit of a better drill down idea about our focus. As I've said before, the trainee process is a learning experience, and the last thing we want to do is unreasonably be filing complaints against people that are trying to learn. And so what you can see is that the vast majority, 78% of those, are focused on supervisory appraisers who have superior experience, knowledge base, and accountability, obviously, for supervising people. Underneath there, I have some information that you can read. I would note that if you look at the first bullet point, that bullet point kind of looks at the statistics from the opposite perspective. At the top of the page, I was telling you the percentage of total complaints that are generated from audits, but if you look at this first bullet point in the bottom, it basically tells you the percentage of audits that result in a complaint. So again, it's very low when you look at it from the audit perspective, basically 2.4%. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, but otherwise this concludes my report.
Thank you, Troy.
Thank you.
General Counsel.
Madam Chair and board members, Kristen Warman, your General Counsel, on Agenda Item 12. Before you in this agenda item is discussion and possible action to adopt new rules and amendments to Chapter 153 of the board's rules. And the 4 rules up for consideration for adoption are 153.5 fees, 153.18 appraiser continuing education, 153.40 and 153.41 are the 2 new rules up before you for adoption. The amendments and new rules create processes for the board to approve continuing education providers and courses for appraisers and collect fees for these processes as authorized by the legislature in the Occupations Code, both under Chapters 1103 and 1105. The amendments and new rules allow the board to approve continuing education and providers and courses without relying on other states or the Appraiser Qualifications Board to do so. They also clarify that continuing education providers need not provide a copy of USPAP to students enrolled in a 7-hour USPAP update course, but must ensure that students have access to either an electronic or paper copy of the current version of USPAP. We did receive one comment on these amendments and new rules as published. The commenter suggested that the board should charge $25 to approve all one-time appraiser course offerings of up to 4 hours in length instead of just the 2 hours in length as proposed. The commenter reasoned that 4 hours is a more logical cutoff because the rules as proposed would not be fair or equitable for education providers who offer 3 or 4 hour continuing education courses only one time. The Education Committee considered this comment and recommends that the board adopt the amendments and new rules as published because the one-time course approval fee was proposed to allow providers a discount when choosing to offer one-time 2-hour courses, since 2 hours is the minimum course length required for approval of a continuing education course under federal law. I also understand that there is another person signed up to speak on these rules that has a comment that the board may want to consider before we move forward with any recommendations.
Thank you, Kristen. We do have a public comment, and so I will invite you back, Sylvia, and if you will just state your name for the record and the organization that you're representing, and then give us your comments.
Sylvia Busk with Champion School of Real Estate, and I am going to first let me say thank you for the opportunity to speak. Okay. And if you will look on page 106, I am going to be speaking to section 153.40 J3A VI and VII. Okay. And so my request for the first one is on the course completion certificate, it is asking for the date of issuance. Is that really necessary for the date of issuing that certificate required? My next one is just to remove the statement date of student registered for, so that we only have the date that the student started and the completion date of that course. Thank you. Is that all?
Thank you for your comments.
Madam Chair and board members, when these rules were proposed, you may remember that part of the discussion was to align our processes for approving continuing education providers and courses with those of the Real Estate Commission, to provide staff with consistent processes for both agencies, since we have common staff for both agencies in some cases. And what I have been notified of is that TREC, in their education rules for classroom courses, which is what the commenter was addressing, has removed the date the student registered for. And what remains in those rules is simply the date the student started and the date the student completed the course. The date of issuance is important because that's the date the education provider is issuing the certificate, and that remains in the TREC rules. So if it's the board's prerogative and you would like to remove the date the student registered for, we could certainly do that and move forward with adoption, because that change would be less onerous or less burdensome than the rule as proposed, and would be a non-substantive change. So if that is your prerogative, then we would simply delete the language registered for and the comma, so that section would read the date the student started and completed the course. And then in your motion, you would simply add the phrase "as presented" to move forward with adoption, if that is your prerogative. Or you can simply move forward with adopting as published, if that is your choice.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Jeffries.
I personally, as education chair, I don't see any substantive reason not to take out the date they're registered for, if it aligns with what TREC's already doing. And I would speak personally to amend it, or whatever the right terminology is, and take those two words out.
So can you form that in a motion for me, Mr. Jeffries?
I can, thank you. But it'll take a little time. No.
You were almost there if you just say, I move.
Madam Chair, I move that Staff is authorized on behalf of this board to submit for adoption new rules and amendments to 22 TAC 153.5, 153.18, 153.40, and 153.41 as stated and amended here in open session.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. The floor is open for discussion. Anybody with a concern? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. I suppose before I called for that, Ms. Warman, is that adequate? Is the motion adequate for your direction?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Very good. We will move to agenda, because I wouldn't want to make Mr. Jeffries do it again. I simply didn't know if we needed to state the amendment, but agenda item number 13.
Agenda item 13 is also an agenda item involving adoption of amendments to the TALCB rules in Chapter 159. The 4 rules before you and up for adoption today are 159.3, 159.105, 159.108, and 159.155. The amendments to 159.3 align this rule with the Occupations Code, which is our statute, and clarify that a quorum of the AMC Advisory Committee is 3 members and renews the AMC Advisory Committee through September 1st of 2022 to coincide with the agency's next quadrennial rule review. The amendments to sections 159.105 and 159.108 align these rules with other TALCB rules and processes for license or registration renewals. The amendments to section 159.155 reduce the percentage of required periodic reviews from 5 to 2% of reviews performed by an AMC in a 12-month period, conform this rule to changes to USPAP adopted by the Appraisal Standards Board, and align the required scope of work to perform a periodic review to the requirements for performing an appraisal review in USPAP. 3 comments were received on the amendments as published, and 1 comment was from a trade association. 2 commenters supported adoption of the amendments as published. 1 commenter suggested changing the phrase appraisal under review to work under review throughout the rule to align the language of the rule with the language of USPAP. Members of the AMC Advisory Committee also recommended removing the phrase and USPAP from subsection E of the amendments as published. The Executive Committee recommended the Board adopt the amendments with those changes as discussed. Staff notes that 1 additional comment was received but not considered by the Executive Committee. The commenter suggested removing the phrase real property appraisal consulting conclusions from subsection F to align the rule with USPAP because that language is not included in Standards 3 or 4 of USPAP. Staff recommends the Board adopt the amendments with all changes as presented, and that specific language that is referenced is shown on pages 113 of your materials in purple. The other changes are shown on pages 112 in green.
Are there any questions?
Madam Chair.
Again, I don't know there, Tony. I don't know why it sounds odd when it's coming from there, but yes,
I'm
Mr. Pena.
odd. I make a motion that the staff is authorized on behalf of this board to submit for adoption amendments to 22 TAC 159.3, 159.105, 159.108, and 159.155 as presented, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We will move to agenda item number 14, rules for possible proposal, discussion and possible action to propose amendments to 22 TAC 157.4.
Madam Chair and board members, the proposed amendments to this rule would provide additional guidance to applicants, license holders, and members of the public, and clarify the requirements for computing time and deadlines under the TALCB rules. Staff is recommending to propose these amendments as as presented, and these amendments were also considered by the Enforcement Committee, and they also recommended these amendments be published for proposal and public comment.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I move that the staff is authorized on behalf of this board to submit amendments to 22 TAC 157.4 as presented for publication and public comment to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for proposal.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We will move to agenda item number 15, discussion and possible action to propose amendments to 22 TAC 159.104, primary contact, appraiser contact, and contact information.
Madam Chair and board members, the proposed amendments to this rule would allow appraisal management companies to designate more than one controlling person. This change would expand the pool of candidates eligible to serve as a member of the AMC Advisory Committee. Staff recommends proposing the amendments as presented, and the Executive Committee with members of the AMC Committee also recommended that these amendments be published for public comment.
Madam Chair, I move that the staff is authorized on behalf of this board to submit amendments to 22 TAC 159.104 as presented for publication and public comment to the Texas Registry, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for the proposal.
Madam Chair, a second.
Motion by Ms. Lynch, second by Mr. Bolton. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We will move to agenda item number 17, discussion and possible action regarding recommendations from the Enforcement Committee regarding mentor conflicts of interest and proposed changes to the mentor appointment program.
16.
Madam Chair, could we cover agenda item 16 before moving on?
I just was trying to wake you up. Sure. So let's announce item 16, since I took 17 out of order. 16 is discussion and possible action to close the review of 22 TAC Chapter 159, rules relating to the provisions of the Texas Appraisal Management Company Advisory Committee.
With the proposal of the rules we just discussed in the previous agenda items, TALCB has completed the review of Chapter 159 as part of our quadrennial comprehensive rule review process that we are required to complete. And staff recommends approving the closing of the review of Chapter 159 as presented.
Madam Chair, I move that staff is authorized on behalf of this board to close the review of 22 TAC Chapter 159 rules relating to the revisions of the Texas Appraisal Management Company Advisory Committee.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Bolton, second by Ms. Lynch. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. I have previously announced the opening of agenda item number 17 regarding mentors. Please proceed.
Madam Chair and board members, The agenda item before you involves issues considered by the Enforcement Committee, specifically a complaint regarding a board-appointed mentor and conflicts of interest. After reviewing the complaint, the committee found that it is an inherent conflict of interest for a board-appointed mentor to represent a respondent in an adversarial role against the board in a complaint or experience audit proceeding. The committee also found it to be a financial conflict of interest for a board-appointed mentor to represent a respondent when negotiating an agreed order requiring mentorship as a term of that agreed order, and then agreeing to provide the mentorship required under the terms of the agreed order to that same respondent. Based on these identified conflicts of interest, and to provide notice to all board-appointed mentors, because the board will be considering renewing the appointment of mentorship or of its mentors in February of 2019, so at our next quarterly meeting, the committee recommends the board adopt changes to the mentor agreement. And those changes are shown on pages 131 of your materials, specifically the addition of paragraphs 4, 7, and 8 to the mentor agreement. Paragraphs 7 and 8 specifically address the conflicts of interest issues that were just discussed, and paragraph 4 is a recommendation from the Enforcement Division to allow a board-approved mentor to sign one confidentiality agreement that would allow the mentor to receive any materials throughout his term or her term of mentorship. So they would not have to sign that for each case in which they provided mentorship. So it's an efficiency addition to the mentor agreement.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Pena?
I move that the board approve the proposed changes to the mentor appointment agreement as presented.
I'll second.
A motion from Mr. Pena, a second from Mr. Bolton. Any discussion?
Yes. Just more a comment than anything. I just wanted to say thank you to the Enforcement Committee and staff, all those involved in this. I think y'all did a really good job. I know there was some things that had to be addressed and had to go back to committee, et cetera, so thank y'all.
Any additional questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We'll move to agenda item number 18, which is discussion and possible action regarding amendments to the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board Budget Development Policy.
Madam Chair and members, Doug Oldmixon, Commissioner. What you have before you is the result of a significant amount of work that was described by the Chair of the Budget Committee in his report earlier in the meeting. I will hit the highlights of the, I'll hit the highlights of the amendments and then answer any questions that you might have. This item and the next item come out of comments that were included in the Sunset staff report with Sunset staff report, and then on the basis of that report, the agency response included a directive from this full body to the staff to work directly with the Budget Committee to add additional detail, direction, accountability, timeline, those kinds of emphasis, substance, additional detailed substance to both of the policies, the budget development policy and the reserve policy. And so the staff working with the committee has recommended some changes here. First, we added some additional specific earlier first draft or draft delivery deadlines. You'll see those dates included, as well as mandatory meetings on each of the drafts, at least one mandatory meeting, and then an additional authorization, specific authorization for the chair of the committee to call the budget committee into special meeting at any time to deal with the issues that arise from the development of the budget. And so those specific timelines are included there. For the first draft, so that it is ready at least 10 days prior to the May meeting, at which time the full commission will have that, instead of delivered to you at the dais, it'll be included in your materials ahead of time. And so you'll have much more time to review it and absorb it and ask any questions about it. You'll be more prepared at both the May meeting and the August meeting. And then any feedback from the May meeting, there'll be another deadline for receipt of that, as well as a deadline for the staff to incorporate all of that and return that to the budget committee, at which time they'll have another second mandatory meeting and any other special meetings that are necessary to get through that second draft and develop the final draft, again on a time frame that allows it to be included in the August materials as well. And so that's kind of the timeline issues. As far as policies go, a clarification about the 5-year data set that needs to be included, the revenue projections. One of the criticisms from the Sunset staff was there was insufficient consideration of external economic factors. And so we built that in. We will provide to you general economic and especially real estate related industry trend data that's available at the time for consideration in working on the budget. And so that's new paragraph number 2. And then a change to the amount of the reserve for the operation and contingencies reserve. Wanted to make sure that as a part of the budget development policy, of course, we have this contingency reserve, which truly is for unanticipated fluctuations in actual cash flow and unanticipated contingencies. And so there was a bracket, and we expanded that bracket a little bit, so it's between 30 and 40% of anticipated current proposed budget's estimated operating expenses, excluding all the pass-through stuff, so it truly is operating. And then one additional recommendation was that we add some detail with respect to when should the staff, or from your perspective, when do you want the staff, or direct the staff to bring you options for consideration of potential fee adjustments. So obviously, if we went through a budget process and determined that the expenses are going to exceed the projected revenue, then we would bring that potential to you as well, some options for either reduction of expenses or raising of revenue. But on the opposite side, as has been the case, we are fortunate to be in this situation so far. Typically, the revenue will exceed the expenses, and so the real question then becomes: at what point should we consider doing a fee reduction, so that that's not a consistent pattern? So limitations on the accumulation of excess by giving some of that back to the through fee reductions when it's appropriate. So we added in a metric that basically says when all of the when the amount of reserve exceeds 120% or exceeds the approved balances by 20%, then it's mandatory for us to bring you options on how to deal with that, how you might return some of that, and very specific on when it would, what fees would be reduced by how much, when it would start, when it would end, obviously to try to be fair in terms of a license cycle. And then very clear responsibility at the board level for the opportunity to make recommendations and take action to reallocate at any particular time. So, for example, if this body, after due consideration, said, just use this as an example, that we want to hire an additional person, and that person is not included in the budget today, we could say that someone could make a motion to reallocate some money from a reserve to the operating budget to fund that person. But you can do that essentially at any time, and that's just to make sure that you know that you have that. And then a little more directive on the budget status report, so that we will always put in comments if there's a variation of 20% or more up or down in on any particular line item. And then we'll give you that report obviously at every quarterly meeting. And as I suggested to you earlier, I will also let you know when the monthly reports, of which this is one, the budget status report is a monthly report, and so we'll let you know when those are posted so that you can track it on a monthly basis if you care to. So those are the recommendations for the changes to the budget development policy. The one thing that we didn't include in the materials, and I apologize, is the Exhibit A. It says for timeline summary. So there's a calendar checklist that has all of those dates in it and all the deliverables. And I apologize, this is not in the materials.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
So you've seen it.
We have seen it.
Yeah, I just...
Yeah. But I was just looking here and it's like, nope, that's not here.
No, but we have seen it. We did get a chance to look at it a bit yesterday, and we did, because we were busy in the workshop speaking to some other items and some in more detail. There probably will be a bit of discussion about the budget adjustment because we didn't speak to it at much detail, or the budget policy adjustment. I've got a couple of quick questions, Commissioner, to either address to you or the committee. Now I've seen it. The change, and I appreciate you calling it to our attention, the change from 3 to 4 months,
yes,
which was the previous policy, indicated that we should keep an operation and contingency reserve of 3 to 4 months, would have been an indicated 25 to 33%.
Correct.
This policy recommends a 30 to 40% or a ratchet up. And while I appreciate the conservative nature, one of the questions was, why hang on to so much money when we have some budgetary needs? And so I was just curious if there was something that we were forecasting that caused us to raise it, or was there any consideration given to doing something like 25 to 35%?
We discussed that, and I'll tell you the rationale behind the recommendation for changing it. So even the bracket of 25 to 30, or 3 to 4 months, 25 to 33%, was based on when we first came up with the policy, we kind of polled other SDSI agencies to see what they were doing, and in fact, we looked back at that again, and actually they tend to hold on to a little bit more.
Okay.
And so this is not an unusual kind of a number, but it also, what it does is, I think that it gives it will allow you more freedom to say, okay, if we think it's going to be a little tighter on the if we think our revenues are going to be a little tighter, then perhaps we go towards the higher side of the percentage. Whereas if we think our revenues are going to be as they have been, more generous, then perhaps towards the lower side. The other psychological thing about that is this. If you have more in reserve, you're more likely to say, this is my own psychological analysis on this. You're more likely to say, you know what, take $25,000 out of that and put it against this particular thing that we want to do, which is the estimate for a programming adjustment to automate this particular process for our customers, to be able to do it automatically. Not something that we projected previously and included in our plan, but an opportunity arose, and you say, well, okay, we're at 37% right now on our numbers. So take that $30,000 and let's do that. I think people feel more comfortable doing that if there's just a little bit more of a margin there.
So if the board decided to go all the way to the top end of the reserve, that would be 40%, right?
Correct.
And then you would have to be an additional 20% above that to consider a fee reduction. Is that correct?
Before we would be required to bring you one.
Correct. We can bring, I appreciate that clarification. We can bring one at any time, but that would be the trigger point.
Mandatory
that
trigger.
you are mandatory. Okay.
That's correct.
And actually, if memory serves me right, I believe this came up in the committee meeting, and I believe it was Alex, but we also had the same questions as well, but we could certainly lower that.
No, good. I'm fine. I just wanted to understand it. I just wanted to understand the distinction or the motivation for raising it. I'm pretty conservative by nature, and so I kind of like having a bigger fund, but I also recognize we've got some needs, and so I don't want to just sock money away in a reserve and ignore or cause us to be so cautious that we don't feel like we can meet some of those needs as well. So just wanted to open it for conversation. I'm certainly pleased with the work that the committee did. This is obviously a lot of hard work, and I do appreciate the work the committee set aside. The chair mentioned to me that we might have made him work almost an entire day that day, right? And that it was heavy lifting.
I just want to make sure we get it right, so I'm glad you are asking questions. Let's
Well, I think in conjunction with having suspended the real estate piece, I think we satisfy maybe some of the earlier concerns, and then at the same time maintain a conservative level of savings. I think it solves what the intent of both, I think, our board and then also the concern of the Sunset Group.
Agreed. Other comments or questions? One of you hardworking gentlemen want to make a motion?
I'll go ahead and form the motion then. Madam Chair, let me make sure I get this right. I move that the board approve the amendments to the TALCB budget development policy as presented.
Second.
The motion by Mr. Black, a second by Mr. Pena. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We will move to agenda item number 19, discussion and possible action regarding the amendments to the TALCB Reserve Fund investment policy.
So the same motivation and the same group of folks operating under the same objective and directive from the entire body worked on this one. So let me just again hit the highlights for you. We documented, well, first of all, the training, you actually heard the oral report of the training which Ms. Pifo delivered in her report today, that oral report that, yes, the PFIA training, all required training has been received. And so that's adding to this a reminder that that's something we need to do annually. And because this includes the Investment Act compliance information, so that's why that is in there. So the description of the reserve balances changed to 30 to 40%, consistent with the budget development policy. The education development reserve, that's just that reflects the language in the statute. It's not that it should, it does include all of the administrative penalties. And then the long-term facilities master plan reserve, one of the things that was discussion from the Sunset staff was that there was not any limitation put on it, nor was there a plan for its use, not an adequate description of what it could be used for, and so that is meant to fulfill that requirement. So both that the balance in the reserve will never exceed the actual costs necessary to complete whatever project it is approved by the body, and then it documents that until we receive legislative, so this is the action that was taken at the August meeting, is now incorporated into this, that until legislative approval is received to pursue the development, that no additional funds will be placed into it. Now, that doesn't prevent funds from being transferred out of it. Okay, I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of that. That if at any time it's determined that this is, that it, for whatever reason, you want to transfer funds out of this reserve, you certainly can do that.
Commissioner,
that's not an expenditure. That's under your transfer authority. Yes, sir.
So is there anything in here that says that in the investment policy, that should the board decide to transfer funds out of long-term facilities reserve, it can do so?
Let me just look. I know that we put that language specifically, just as a reminder to you, in the budget development policy, but we may not have.
I kind of don't think it's in there, but we can certainly put it in there right now.
Yeah. Here's what it says. Sorry. Okay. General Counsel reminded me that our current MOU has this commitment to a pro rata contribution. Okay, and so the MOU requires a 12-month, well, other than by agreement, it has a withdrawal provision, but it can be amended by agreement at any particular time. So it just always has to be taken into consideration. You could move funds out, but if it at some point depleted it to a place where you couldn't meet your obligations that you've agreed to on pro rata, then you have to figure out, are you going to move money back into it after that's been approved or what? So those are you certainly have, the board certainly has the authority, and it's easy enough to add that language in here. And so I think the only caution that I hear the General Counsel saying is subject to the obligations under the MOU, the board can remove funds from this particular reserve at any time.
I have a question on page 2, reserve expenses, where it's item number 1. It says current operations and contingencies reserve. Isn't that saying the same thing, that we're able to use that fund for current operations and contingencies as needed?
Out of that reserve, I think the question was primarily out of the long-term facilities master plan reserve. That's what you were trying to get at, right?
From the different
Right.
fund.
The operations and contingency, that is.
Different fund.
Yes.
Okay.
And that is the purpose of that fund, is to take care of those unanticipated kind of fluctuations.
So, Mr. Bolden, could you restate that one more time, just so I'm clear, what your question was again?
Well, I was asking if it was stated in this reserve, the investment policy, if you could move funds from the long-term facilities reserve for operations or other uses.
Gotcha. Well, we addressed that one because I asked that question as well. And the way it is right now, we unanimously said we don't want to touch that. We want to leave it alone right now, but we can make a change to it because there is a possibility, that we may still be building a structure. But as of right now, the way we left it, and Mr. Sostra and Mr. Pena, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the way we addressed it was that let's leave it be for now. Is that right?
Right. The intent was hopefully just to keep the balance intact and not add to it, but we could add conditions for utilization of the.
And I think
it isn't a designated fund, technically as an accounting standpoint.
Right.
Or a restricted fund. The intent is to maintain the balance, but not to add to it. But if we need to add conditions of withdrawal or whatever, or usage, then this may be the time, or it can go back and be changed.
So let me just, so I understand this, is that, so it's the Budget Committee's position that we leave that in place and in anticipation of maybe possibly we might build a building sometime.
That's right.
And does that consider that we have, before we even start thinking about that we have to get legislative approval? And at that time, then we would start contributing to that building fund again, as well as consider utilizing it for that purpose.
The answer to that is yes.
Commissioner?
I think that's
I believe so.
That's exactly where we're going, is the Budget Committee, when they had the discussion, was, all right, it's there. The entire board has already said, we're not putting any more money there, okay, until we get legislative permission to develop. And if we get it, then at that point, once we get permission, then we still have to do further feasibility and design and all that, and then come up with now there's a number, and it's like, well, you know what, we can't afford that, or we couldn't afford that for 3 or 4 more, 5 more years, or whatever. And then I think at that point, it's the will of the, anyone can make a motion to do away with it, or no longer be a part of that.
Well, and I can certainly appreciate the complexity of this issue, because I think there's several components to it.
There are.
But should the board, and I guess at what point does the board say, this is not a building fund anymore? Is there a threshold that we should develop? And then how do you deal with it with the MOU? I'm guessing you have to do that in concert with TREC as well. But what and maybe these are things that we need to flesh out in long-term facilities committee too. But it seems to me at some point, if there's not an opportunity to build a building, then we need to deal with those contingencies. And I want to make sure that, getting back to this, that the reserve fund policy probably needs to reflect that. Now, I'm not saying it's ready for that. It sounds like we need to do other things as well, but I just want everybody to be thinking about that.
Well, I completely agree with what you're saying. So my take on it is that I don't want to totally kibosh it, because there's still a possibility that we could build a new structure. So we've just essentially are saying, let's don't add to it. Now, there's not, I believe, if memory serves me right, there's 1,016,000 roughly, and we're not adding to it. So it's a decent amount, but it's not, significant enough. If we did do something with it, well, how much can we actually do with it? But at the same rate, I'm sure we can do something, no question about it. But I kind of like the idea still of trying to build a new structure if possible, and I guess we've Mr. Oldmixon, what do we think? We have another year or two before we can come up with that?
Let me offer a suggestion, because we've got a long-range building committee
Yes.
member, Mr. Bolton. We are in the midst of problem solving. We are in the midst of a deep dive into the budget. We are in the midst of customer service issues. And so I believe the goal is to simply ask the question, is there a provision inside the policy, should we choose to do something different, that allows us to do that, keeping in mind this is not the only place we would have to make changes. I think I mentioned earlier we'd have to change the MOU, so it's not something that we're going to make a sweeping change on anyway. Maybe we just give some consideration to, I think the concern is, and as we should always be looking in appointed board positions, not just for our need today, but the person who comes behind us that did not participate in this conversation, how can we make it clear inside this policy what steps would need to be taken in order to make adjustments to that reserve fund? And is there a way to put a sentence or so in that says, I'm hearing people say, yes, you can hang on to it, yes, you can move it, and if you moved it, what would be the necessary steps so that it's not it's not missed, the steps that are necessary.
I'm happy to make two suggestions. One is you could adopt it and then task the budget committee to add a provision like that, which would give us some time to vet that language rather than try to draft on the fly today. Because the other thing that I will tell you is that at any time you could propose a change to this policy. This is not set in stone forever. This was our best efforts at addressing all the concerns that were contained in the report.
I would totally agree. And so we could table this effectively, or...
Well, let me just add a little color to our conversation within the committee. It was our understanding that we need legislative approval to move forward. What was made plainly evident with the Sunset Committee is that there's no appetite right now for a building. I mean, that was pretty obvious. So everything has been put on halt. We're not moving forward with funding this anymore. But we understood that at any point, the board, through approval, can move funds as necessary. And so, and the other understanding that I have is that the MOU requires this reserve fund. Is that correct?
No, the MOU was a request from this board to the commission, that the provision that's a different board, right? Different members of the board, not to be dismissed or considered as potential tenants in a building. If there is going to be a building, we want to be a pro rata partner. Okay, we want to be owners as well. And so that's the language that specifically says that the participation in long-term facilities would be on a pro rata basis, and that's all that it says.
And so from the standpoint of the committee, at least from my standpoint, we were looking at this. I wasn't involved. I don't believe the other committee members were involved when this entire process of a building fund was started. But it was, to our understanding, well thought through, and
I think I was actually.
Well, and basically that the determination was made by this board that it's a good idea to begin to sock money away, because ultimately that's probably the best option that we have from a long-term perspective with respect to, rental or ownership or that type of thing. So we didn't want to make any rash decisions with respect to the funds that are currently socked away. And so that was kind of the thought process coming out of the budget committee from my standpoint.
But it seems to me we're having two conversations. One is our budget as we've currently approved it, something that is the goal of this board, and of course will be addressed at every future situation, meaning do you go and use the money that's currently in reserve somewhere for something else? And then secondly is the policy that we are amending clear enough to ourselves or future board members so that they understand what the availability of those resources are. And so, and again, to add color, and simply because I feel obligated to report to you because I was present, I'm not so sure that it was clear amongst the hearing that the building was a bad idea. And I may have read the Sunset Report a time or two more than some. I know you've all read it at least once and probably more than once, but I, anticipating cross-examination, probably read it a half a dozen times. And as I read it more often, I think what I read inside the body of that report is not necessarily a lack of appetite for a building or even a criticism for having considered it, but a criticism for having used dollars or reserved dollars when we were having a customer service problem. And so almost, and I felt like, and if you heard any of my comments, they were that I felt like I was reading an interpretation by someone that we had created a policy to create a fund for a building, which is not true based on my personal experience. The policy we've always had about reserves, which is one of the reasons I asked the question, why are we raising the reserve amount? Because when someone else looked inside our organization, it appeared to them we were raising reserves to create a building, and those dollars we were setting aside for to be conservative, and or in the case of the building, they were kind of leftover funds. The policy wasn't created for that purpose. So I don't want there to be anything implied by the new amendment to the policy that we just moved the shell pieces, right? That we just, instead of calling it a reserve fund, we raised the amount of money on the back end to 40% so that there's still some leftover money. And so I don't think that, I don't think it's fair to say there is a absolute opinion that a building should be thrown out. I don't think it's an absolute clarity that people think we should or should not have one. I do think there is an absolute obligation being expressed to us that we need to be going the step further, that we need to engage the process.
Madam Chair, I think my purpose in all of this was to ensure that us and future boards understand that there may be a designation here, but if plans change, and they need to be aware that as plans change, this is not locked in. And I think probably in the coming year, the Long-Term Facilities Commission, our committee, will explore what the best thing is, because our previous plans didn't come to fruition. So what do we do next? And I think we'll explore that, and I think that may give some direction to the Budget Committee as to what at least we on this other committee think you should do with this, and if that means to retain it or to redirect it or what have you. I just would be comfortable, or think it may be something to add once the language is vetted, but that we need to understand that though that may be a designation today, it doesn't necessarily have to be that, but also understanding that there are other obligations or other agreements that need to be worked out too. Like I said, it's complex.
I think it's a good conversation, but go ahead.
This is exactly what I wanted, so thanks, Mr. Bolden, for bringing this up. I wanted us to all get engaged. So the three of us that are on the committee, we were pretty much, not that we were correct, just let's leave that alone for now. But I completely appreciate what you're saying. So I don't know, there's other board members I'm not hearing from. I would be interested in some other opinions too. I mean, because we can certainly hold this, and we can have another committee meeting and give us some time and then redo this for the next one. I'm real interested in what everyone thinks.
I have a suggestion. I think that what we're saying is that the money is available. If we have and it is. But what we want to say is that it is available should we need it. I think there's also a consensus that we don't want to spend it unless there is a clear need. But I think the idea of it being fluid and available should be reflected, possibly. But that we're not just in there to dip into it.
Well,
that's what I'm hearing.
Is that the only portion of this proposed policy that we are having issue with? Because my inclination is let's pass what we have, know that we have a outstanding need, direct the budget committee to address potentially an insertion of an additional section as it relates to this, and let you continue working but not just hold up the progress. I would like to be able to report, should I have another opportunity to speak to Sunset, that we've made some progress, because that's what we reported in our public comments, that we were doing so. But I don't want to do so unless you're comfortable. And our general counsel and another board member appear to have comments.
Yes,
so, Mr.
just
Renfro.
quickly, I don't have any problem with keeping the fund where it is. Progress is being made because we've decided not to put any more funds aside. So that is some progress. We can always come back and address this issue when we move down the road and figure out some of the things we've discussed earlier that we might want to tackle that may require some more funds if they're feasible. We can always go back and readdress this. I don't think it's a bad idea, and I'm tending to agree with the committee that we just leave the funds there until we get further down the road and figure out exactly where we stand and what we need.
General Counsel?
My purpose in all of this was not necessarily different than that.
That's right.
But just to have in our policy saying this is where this money is now, but it doesn't have to be should the board decide to do something else.
It's 5 years from now, the board is all different, and there's something in place.
Are you uncomfortable, Mr. Bolton, that if we take action today, that it will somehow fall off the radar and the language that you're concerned about won't get inserted?
Madam Chairman, I know you won't let that happen.
As you all well know, I serve at the pleasure of the governor, and I hopefully I'll be back, but we'll see. General Counsel?
Madam Chair and board members, excellent discussion, and of course, at the board's will or pleasure, this policy can be amended at any time, as the commissioner has already stated. And that is actually the language I wanted to point out to you under the subheading Reporting and Annual Review on page 147 of your materials. The investment policy is reviewed annually, and the board may make any necessary changes by adoption at that annual review. So at least you will see this policy once a year. It's typically reviewed in February every year, but you are certainly welcome to ask that it be reviewed more frequently if it is the board's desire to make changes or to any of the reserve funds and the way those funds are being allocated and spent.
I think that the suggestion to retake this particular provision, to maybe add language to make it clear that these funds are not restricted, I think it's a good suggestion that we can bring back to the committee and hash out and bring some new language to the board.
I'm fine with that too.
Yeah.
Unless, council, or would it be better, you think, to pass this and then address it in the next one, or just go ahead and hold off and let's take it back to committee?
My impression is that of the chair, that she will be back before Sunset Commission in December. And it would be better to be able to say that we've taken some steps to move this forward. And if it's the board's prerogative to make changes to the policy or to send it back to the committee to consider changes, then that is something that the board can do. But I would suggest that you show that you've made some progress, as the chair has pointed out.
Okay, I'm agreeing with that as well. So, but we're going to take that in mind in the next committee member or meeting. Then we can start adding some things.
Well, I'd like to just, Madam Chair, if I may, since I seem to kind of cause this hornet's nest here, I'm going to go ahead and move that the board approve the amendments to the TALCB Reserve Funds Investment Policy as presented for now.
Second.
Thank you. I'm hesitant to ask for any discussion, but I do want to know if you have anything else you'd like to add or discuss. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Staff, there was a significant amount of conversation, but the motion was fairly direct. Do you need any additional direction? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
And members.
So, because we did such a great job of actually mixing those up, someone help me. Are we on 19? Are we moved on? We moved past 19 and 20. Okay. Just wanted to be sure that that was clear. Agenda item number 21, report on form revisions due to the FBI fees increase.
Madam Chair, Priscilla P. Fove, Director of Staff and Support Services. I'm just going to give you a brief update on why this fee is changing. The fee for the Federal Bureau of Investigation's fingerprint-based submissions will be increased by $1.25 for each of the initial submissions and resubmissions at renewal beginning on January 1st, 2019. All applications that include this fee online and on paper will be updated to reflect the new fee as of that date. This is simply what we call a pass-through fee, and it is a change over which we have no control.
Thank you, Priscilla.
Thank you.
Questions?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Jeffries.
I move that the board approve changes to TALCB forms and new forms as presented.
I think we're jumping the gun.
It's all right. I probably have created this atmosphere where I can't keep track of where we are today.
Just a report.
It was just a report, Mr. Jeffries. So we will move to. So you got the report, but thank you for trying. I appreciate you moving us.
I'll second.
Proactive.
The discussion and possible action to approve the changes on the forms. That is the agenda item we are at the moment.
Number 22.
Gwen Jackson, Director of ELS Division. Agenda item 22 is the discussion and possible action to approve changes to the following TALCB forms: the appraisal experience affidavit, the addition of appraiser trainee supervision, which is for supervision of 1 to 3 appraiser trainees, the addition of appraiser trainee supervision, which is for supervision of 4 to 5 appraiser trainees, as well as the termination of appraiser trainee supervision form. The appraisal experience affidavit has been revised to add work file to the certification and allow the correct year to be written in the signature line of the document without the need to update the form annually. The remaining forms are proposed to implement the Trainee Experience Review Program and create separate forms for supervisory appraisers who supervise 1 to 3 or 4 to 5 trainees, and a new form allowing either the appraiser trainee or the supervisory appraiser to terminate the supervisory relationship. Staff recommends that the board approve changes to TLCB forms as well as the new forms as presented.
Thank you.
We'll give that floor to Jim over there.
Mr. Jeffries.
Is it time?
Yes, sir.
Go time, go time.
I
Yes.
move that the board approve changes to TLCB forms and new forms as presented.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Jeffries, a second by Ms. Lynch. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Come to the fun part of the agenda, the discussion and possible action regarding nominations to create a slate of candidates for the offices of Vice Chair and Secretary of the Board. Of course, this is the technical, we will have another meeting, but this is the technical meeting where you go ahead and put a slate of officers out. Remember that you can create nominations from the floor at the time, but the floor is open for nominations relating to Vice Chair and Secretary of the Board. Well, we have no volunteer, you know, we can voluntold you, but if there is no...
Madam Chair, I would nominate Martha as Vice Chair and Buster as Secretary.
Okay, there is a...
I think they deserve another shot at this.
I'll second that, if it needs a second.
Are there other nominations? Because you are creating a slate of candidates, so it doesn't have to stop there. You're not going to be making the decision today. You're simply going to be putting the opportunity out there for them to either, Buster, you'll have at least 30 days to try and recruit other people, is my point. Are there any other nominations for consideration for the slate? Hearing none, we keep in mind that that can occur again from the floor at the time that you're actually making the selection. And is there a motion for nominations to cease for the slate at the moment? Not forever, but just for today. You want to move on, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Madam Chair, I move that we cease the slate for today.
Okay. Is any opposition to that?
Nope.
Okay, very good. Then, so while we've got two rounded up, let's move on. The slate will be published as our seated Vice Chair and seated Secretary will be the slate for the moment. We will now move to agenda item number 24, the request for potential future meeting agenda items.
Madam Chair, I'll be quick on this. There are two items I'd like for our board to consider and discuss for the future. One has to do with the time for applicants' experience review. And Troy has told us about the new procedures and that we're on top of this. I just had an idea that we could change, make a rule change that would allow our peer reviewers to assist staff in also reviewing experience, applicants' experience. And I thought that this might shorten the time and be a little proactive, that we could do that if we needed to. The second item I wanted to add is that there's concern about licensure with the AMCs having a rule that within 30 days they have to have the license renewed, or else they're not able to assign jobs to the appraiser. And there are a lot of appraisers that wait less than 30 days to get the job done. So maybe we could shorten that and have the AMCs perhaps think about 2 weeks instead of 30 days to where they stop giving out the jobs to appraisers. So maybe I have not put it in the pretty text, but it's something that I think our board should consider, and it would, both items would alleviate the stress on staff and on appraisers as well.
And let me ask you a couple of questions. Would you be opposed to taking up the experience review potential rule change into a committee setting? Because I believe that it's probably best handled at the enforcement level. They're considering a lot of other opportunities.
Madam Chair, we'd be happy to take that on.
Okay. And Ms. Lynch, would that be acceptable to you, is go ahead and let it be vetted to some degree at a committee level, and that will allow us to then bring it forth. And then I just want to be sure that I understand, is there some process that this board can take? I'm concerned about whether or not we can direct an AMC on how they choose to do their business. Is that the desire?
Well, it stems from the fact that AMCs do not, are not assigning jobs when an appraiser's license is 30 days out from that period forward if it has not been renewed. And so I'm not sure legally or what the right step is, but it seems to cause a lot of concern and on the appraisers.
Is there a way for us to accommodate that, Ms. Mormon?
Just a couple of comments on the two proposed agenda items. Certainly happy to refer the first to the Enforcement Committee for vetting. Just note that that will require a statutory change, not just a rule change. So that's certainly something that the Enforcement Committee can vet and look at and suggest. With respect to the second one, this is an item that the board has received a few complaints on. Residential appraisers, both certified and licensed, have been denied work even though they're on an AMC's panel, if their license expires within less than 30 days. And we have taken steps internally to make sure that we are renewing licenses as soon as we get them. So our Education and Licensing Division, as long as we have the renewal in hand with all of the requirements being satisfied, we are processing those as soon as we have them. They're being placed and prioritized according to expiration date to help alleviate those concerns on our appraisers. But this is certainly an issue that the AMC committee could consider, and you could talk with stakeholders about why they have implemented this practice and what possibility they might see in changing this practice, because we certainly have available to them on our website that an appraiser's license remains in active good standing and the actual expiration date of that license.
The only problem with that is, and once we get enough members to have a AMC committee meeting, we'll be able to address that.
You've got one now. You've got enough now, right?
Well, and with the adoption of the rules today, there is a 3-member quorum that consists of the chair and the 2 AMC committee members.
Okay.
The chair has discussed the possibility of asking for other volunteers, perhaps some of our public board members, because we have no public member representation on the AMC committee. So perhaps if we could invite a public member of the board to attend those meetings and weigh in and give that public perspective.
I'm sure glad you did that for me, because it's on my list of things to do over here, and I feel like I've asked a lot of the board lately. So you public members be thinking about that, because I'm going to ask you that again in a minute to see if I could get a volunteer to show up on those AMC calls for at least a short period of time, and hopefully we can continue to encourage a public member. But
and I'm happy with that.
Okay, perfect.
I can help out there if that...
Perfect. Again, we've grabbed one. Let's keep moving. We have a volunteer. Let the record show Mr. Black is willing to sign in that capacity for us for the moment.
If one of the other public members wants to do it greater than me, that's fine as well.
We can.
Late now.
We could even, tag team to some degree, but that is a capacity that we have been lacking, of course, full committee for a while, and it has begun to affect our ability to be effective. And so I appreciate the executive committee stepping in this last go-round. I appreciate the governor's appointment of our new industry member. I look forward to an additional appointment of a public member, but in the interim, as is always, you guys always step up and do what we need to do to keep things moving. So thanks for that. Are there other requests for future meeting agenda items before I give you mine?
Well, there was the one that came up today, and I don't know if you want to add it. The budget, the budget and reserve policies will be up for annual review in February. And so the recommendation was made, or at least a discussion, about adding that funds availability provision. And Mr. Black, as the chair of the Budget Committee, expressed his willingness to hold a meeting to take that on. And so if that might be another interim assignment, but that's up to you.
And it is.
Yes, that's fine. Would it be something that we needed to have another meeting just to discuss it briefly, or we already got it discussed and it just needs to be in a format that we can vote on it effectively at the next meeting?
I might suggest that we get staff to at least send some language to your committee, and that we host at least a teleconference to that language, because certainly we had a good, healthy discussion here. I think you've got good feedback from the board, and certainly between your Ever Able committee and our staff that's been listening, I think we'll be able to get some format that will work. But I also think you're going to need to be sure that at least the three of you are comfortable with it. Should help us be more efficient.
Okay, so yes, then we'll just get together and have a teleconference, another budget committee meeting, and to discuss this. That's great. Okay.
Okay. So before I make a request and create more work, I'd like to do a specific shout out to our general counsel. As we have been preparing for sunset, and specifically as I've been preparing to sit before the Sunset Commission on your behalf, I have required of her a lot of nights, weekends, and early morning telephone calls. To her credit, she answers every time she sees my phone number, and I don't often answer when I see hers. But it's not a reflection of my desire to talk to her, but simply the fact that it's been very busy. And so anything that you thought, if you listened to the testimony, that you thought that I said was good, except my grandfather, the comments I made about my grandfather, you can give to our general counsel. She was an invaluable resource for me, and having her sit over my shoulder at my request at the hearing was very much needed and very much appreciated. Even though you didn't get to hear her voice on tape, I knew she was back there, and I knew that she had my back, and yours as well, in the process of doing that. So now, having said that, I'd like to ask some work of you. So thank you, Kristen. I do appreciate you. I would like to respectfully request at least a conversation associated with developing a calendar and attack plan for the 16 recommendations presented by the Sunset Commission. That plan of attack, in my mind, looks like a division of duties as it relates to the review. There seemed to me to be some work that could be done at our budget level, some of which has already been taken care of, but some that needs additional conversation. Some that needs to be done at almost every committee level. And so to the degree that we might be able to create a timeline so that this board understands prior to the acceptance of their committee assignments in February what that looks like, and so that we have a checklist to go by, so that we don't let something fall off the radar, because there's a lot going on. If it's possible to try and create I'm thinking a calendar that looks 12 months long, that hopefully achieves as much touch on these issues in the first couple of meetings that this board assembles at in 2019, would be helpful. I suspect that you cannot accomplish 100% of the things, because if there are requirements of statutory changes, obviously those will be longer and require more time, but if we can at least be preparing them or understand in that 6 month period of time. If for some reason you review that and that timeline is unreasonable, I am happy to adjust an expectation, but I think that will be important to this board as we move forward. I'd also request that we go ahead and file the supplemental response to the proposed modifications to reflect the agency's recommendations in the format that's expected by the commissioners, so that our response will match the format of the TREC response, primarily because I believe that unlike our first presentation, we will probably be called together next time based on the way I saw things develop and based on some of the comments. And so I don't want us to have two different formats. I think it would make it incredibly hard for our commissioner and could potentially make it more difficult for the Sunset Commission to understand those responses. So I'd like to see us do that, and if we can have the executive committee review those, and much like TREC's formatting, executive committee, are you willing to take that on? Sure. And so those responses in general have been established, but we're talking about changing formatting and being responsive to the Sunset comments that we received. And then, of course, the comments that we've gotten the volunteer for Mr. Black as it relates to the public member attending some AMC meetings as a result of the agenda item number 13. Thank you for taking care of that.
This is more a telephone, though, right?
It can be.
Well, I mean,
no, we usually
I'm 6 hours away.
We usually have them on Saturday afternoon, Mr. Black. And
no,
I'm teasing you. Yes, sir. They are teleconferences.
Yeah, no problem.
And you
Sure.
should be able to weigh in.
Yep.
And then, of course, we have asked for the budget development policy to be vetted by the budget committee sometime between now and the next time we meet. So I think that's all of my long list. I have 72 pieces of sticky notes up here. So are there other things that the board would like considered on future agenda items?
One other thing that the board requested, and it was a request directed to me, your general counsel, and that was to provide you a status report of any litigation in which the board is a party, once that moves beyond the administrative level and into the court and appellate level. And I have committed to do that, and so we'll be providing that to you going forward.
Madam Chair, two things. I'd, one, like to recommend that all the committees stay intact for the next year, just so that there's not any transitional, just weirdness to all that we're attacking right now. And then on a personal level, thank you for your testimony. It had to be very stressful and time-consuming, and it's not fun. And I knew, and I could tell that it's a burden on you, and you shouldn't have had to take that on your own. And you didn't per se, but it was only you, and you had to feel like you were on an island. So thank you for putting up with that for us on our behalf.
I did not feel like I was an island because I was well supported by staff, and many of you were reaching out to me and helping me, but thank you for the comments. It is stressful simply because, as I've mentioned in public comment, when someone says you're not doing your job, I know how that affects me personally, and I know you all. I've been serving with you, and I know our staff, and so I want to have you all understand and hear that I don't think that report is an accurate reflection of the commitment inside this organization, and we've just got to do a good job of showing that as we move forward. And
Madam Chair, I'd just like to reiterate Mr. Pena's comments and do appreciate, I'm well aware of the hard work that you and time that you spend and invest in the chairmanship and obviously leading up to your testimony at the Sunset Commission. It showed.
Can we give Madam Chair a round of applause?
echo those out to your staff, because they are the ones who did the heavy
as well. Thank you.
Very good. No, I think we've probably given them plenty of a future agenda items. So if certainly the floor is still open, but if you have others, we may either that or we need to come in the day before and have the next meeting for 2 days straight.
I have one reminder.
Okay.
Madam Chair and members, this is just a reminder that the legislative session will gavel in on January the 8th of this year. And consistent with the legislative intent in our act, the executive committee is charged with the responsibility of acting on behalf of the board in between meetings. Recall that, of course, You can call a special meeting if one is needed. Just making all of the members aware of that. But if anything comes up in the nature of either a responsive or a requested change that would require legislative action, the staff will take the direction of the executive committee unless the chair determines to call a special meeting on that. So I just want to remind everyone that that's the kind of the rules of the game going forward. And sometimes it's very rapid that we have to respond to some proposal that's out there, or sometimes very protracted. In finding an opportunity to amend something that you might want that would be good for us. We know that there will be a sunset bill. We know that. And so that bill may provide the opportunity for others to try to do things that would affect the agency. And it may also provide an opportunity for the agency to try to get some changes that it's looking for as well. So I just remind you that those both opportunities and challenges will be coming up, and that's kind of the expectation going forward. If you want to be more involved, please reach out to the chair and recommend, if you wish, at some point for a special meeting prior to our February regularly scheduled meeting, which is the next thing I believe we'll talk about.
And it is. Future meeting dates. Get your calendars out. We have a proposed meeting date of February the 8th. I believe we addressed that at the last board meeting and kind of made some adjustments. We do need to probably go ahead and try and anticipate the next called meeting, which would normally occur sometime in May, generally May 17th. Looks like the one that would work best with all of the graduations and holiday conflicts. Generally acceptable with the board?
Yep. You bet.
Mr. Black, can you get it on your calendar, please?
Yes, ma'am, I do. Y'all have accommodated me enough. Y'all decide when we're going to do them, and I'll be here.
And that's, I was only teasing Mr. Black because he does have a schedule that is very strict, and so
It's freeing up, though.
Okay. We need his input, so we try and make sure that we can all be here. So May the 17th, go ahead and block that on your calendars. Is there any other business before the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board?
May 17th. No, February 9th.
February the 8th, May the 17th.
So we're going with the 17th.
Hearing none, we'll consider ourselves adjourned. The time is about 3 o'clock.